You all coming back for lunch promptly. With that, I have Mr. Dan Hughey with the Finance Authority giving us a debt overview update. So Dan, the floor is yours.
Having the time to get in front of you all, give you the debt update. Some of you are used to seeing it for a number of years. I know we have some new members. Some of it will be repeat for some of you and then new for others. I'll walk through all these as quickly as I can, and glad to take questions either during or after we're through the slide deck. Brief outline, we're going to go through our debt management overview, talk about the Indiana Finance Authority, the Public Finance Director, the state's credit rating history. Then we'll talk about our appropriation-backed debt and the oversight of that debt, and then talk about some of the non-appropriation-backed debt we have and the oversight on that. And then we have a few slides on our environmental programs where we do receive a small amount of appropriation dollars each year for those programs. In 2005, the General Assembly created the Indiana Finance Authority to oversee state-related debt. This enabling legislation consolidated 5 previously separate entities into the IFA as it's now shown, where we have the Indiana Transportation Finance Authority, State Office Building Commission, the Indiana Recreation Development Commission, State Revolving Fund, Indiana Development Finance Authority, and the Indiana Health and Facilities Finance Authority. The IFA now issues debt on behalf of all these 6 predecessor agencies and has managed their debt since 2005. We also manage debt for special projects such as the Stadium and Convention Center project, the Indiana State Fair Coliseum project, and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway project. During that 2005 General Assembly, the Public Finance Director was given statutory oversight of all state debt issuance and is the Chief Executive Officer of the Indiana Finance Authority. Pursuant to this authorization and executive order, the Public Finance Director is also a board member of the Indiana Bond Bank and the Indiana Housing Community Development Authority. They do both issue debt, but not appropriation-backed debt. We are also involved in the approval and review of all public university debt. We are involved in all debt issuances for the State Fair Commission, the Ports of Indiana, and the Indiana Secondary Market for Educational Loan, which I believe now is has a doing business as Invest Ed. The other key thing is prior to 2005, you had 6 different issuing authorities all approaching the market differently and at different times and sometimes not communicating with one another. We now have a consolidated entity that issues debt on behalf of all of these units of government. The other important one is we now have one voice that interacts with the rating agencies to assist us in maintaining our AAA credit rating by all 3 rating agencies. Brief slide of where we currently stand on our credit rating. We have been AAA with all major 3 rating agencies, Standard & Poor's since 2008, Moody's since 2010, and Fitch since 2010. We actually just had our ratings reviewed when we refinanced some debt, and all 3 rating agencies reaffirmed our AAA rating along with a stable outlook. And in this current environment, to see that as a testament to what we're doing debt-wise and fiscally in the state of Indiana. Another slide I'll show you shows how states around us are performing right now. The slide deck in front of you is Moody's every year puts out what they call a debt median report, where they kind of lay out states' debt portfolios and measure them against debt per capita and debt per gross domestic product. Our net tax supported debt, which is the debt that actually has a appropriation behind it and appropriation only, in 2019 was $1.8 million. That ranked 37th, which means the higher the number, the lower. So 50th is the lowest, we're 37th. 2020, we were down to about 1.7 million if you're rounding. Our net tax supported debt per capita in 2019 was 270. It's now down to 251. We rank 45th, which means there's only 5 states that are lower than us. Similar parameters on debt as a part of gross domestic product and personal income. The slide below shows how we compare to some of our Midwestern states. You will see a number of them are not faring quite as well as us. Kentucky ranks in lower quadrants across the board on all of those parameters. And Illinois obviously is similar. Illinois right now is rated triple B minus, which means they are one downgrade away from going down to junk status. Ohio is double A plus. Wisconsin is double A plus or double A, depending on the rating agencies. Kentucky is double A minus or A. Michigan is double A. So we are the only triple A state in this quadrant, which is something, again, we as folks in Indiana should be very proud of. Next slide kind of walks through our appropriation-backed debt by different quadrants. The Transportation Finance Authority currently has $786 million of debt outstanding. The public university debt, which is fee replacement, meaning there are fees the universities charge for this debt, is about $1.3 million. The Stadium Convention Center debt is approximately $963 million. On that one, we do have revenues that support that debt. There is no appropriation dollars that have been used on this project. And the Indiana State Fair is approximately $49 million. State Office Building is about $238 million. The Indiana Bond Bank moral obligation debt is about $121 million. We'll go into a little more detail on the Indiana Bond Bank and moral obligation debt in a bond bank slide. The Recreational Development Commission, which is for our state parks and state park inns, is $9,000. The Motor Speedway debt is $78 million. This was to do improvements out there. Motor Speedway makes us a $2 million a year lease payment as part of this. And then there was a special qualified motorsports investment district that captures income tax and sales tax in that district to help us, put money back in the general fund for this bond issue. And then the last one is a bond issue we did for the East End Crossing, or EEC, which is our Ohio River Bridge project between Jeffersonville and Louisville. About $129 million. So in total, our total appropriation-backed debt is approximately $3.8 million. I'll go into a little more detail on which one actually counts as the rating agencies call it net tax-supported debt, which is a much lower number. I think we touched on this earlier, but as far as the issuing authorities, the oversight by the IFA for Indiana Transportation Finance Authority, State Office Building Authority, and Recreational Development Commission, the IFA, and Public Finance Director, all that debt flows through the IFA. Public universities, we work closely with the Budget Committee, State Budget Director, and the universities to look at their proposed debt offerings, give our comments, and then pass and have that discussion with State Budget Agency before they come to Budget Committee for their approval. Stadium Convention Center, we also issue that through the IFA. And the Indiana Bond Bank, for any debt they issue that has moral obligation, has to go to Budget Committee, and the Public Finance Director is on the Indiana Bond Bank board. Now we'll go through the different portfolios of debt real quickly. We issue debt on behalf of the Indiana Department of Transportation to finance the cost, construction, acquisition, reconstruction, or improvement of our state highways. There has been no state highway or highway revenue bond issued since 2004. The current amount outstanding is $786 million. The majority of this debt is backed by state appropriated gas tax dollars and other resources. So this is actually true appropriation supported debt. This portfolio is 100% fixed rate, and we are paying down approximately $70 to $80 million a year in principal each year on these bonds. And the majority of these bonds will pay off in 2029. The next group is the fee replacement university debt we talked about briefly. These are bonds that are issued by the universities and their state appropriation to reimburse the university for their debt service, but it's not considered a direct appropriation of the state of Indiana. Again, these bonds have to go to the Budget Committee to be approved by Budget Committee and by the Budget Director. And debt outstanding will continue to, we expect the debt outstanding to grow over the next few years as authorization for new projects have yet to be finalized. You'll see the list of the different debt outstanding. IU about 358, Ivy Tech 235, Purdue 322, Ball State 190, USI approximately 85 million, ISU 103, and Vincennes about 37 for a total of about 1.3 million. Billion, sorry. Next slide is our Stadium and Convention Center portfolio. This was for the financing of Lucas Oil Stadium and the expansion of the Convention Center. That expansion of the Convention Center, I think before, at least when it was done, made us the 16th largest convention center in the U.S. as far as floor space. I believe we still have the most hotel rooms connected to a convention center of any convention center in the U.S., which is also as part of I think, a nice way for them to market our building. The original bond issue for both the Stadium and Convention Center portfolio was actually 79% variable rate debt and/or was hedged by swap agreements, and 21% fixed rate. Since 2015, we have been very targeted and strategic in refunding or refinancing this portfolio. We now only have 38% of our debt that's in variable or hedged bonds and 62% in fixed rate bonds. And then 100% of the convention center debt now is totally fixed rate. So one portfolio convention center is all fixed rate debt. Repayment sources for these are local food and beverage, hotel, rental car, and admissions tax, and Colts license plate fees. As of right now, our debt service payment we made in July was fully covered by those hospitality taxes. Our next payment that's due in January 1st, or we make it put together on December 31st, we will have the funds to make that payment. And we do have an excess revenues account that has a balance in it of approximately $70 million that gives us what I would call the cushion for these shortfall in revenues. We anticipate that estimate to allow us, if the revenues for the hospitality tax remain flat right now, which is approximately about 60% of what it was pre-COVID, reserves and other cash balances in the trust estate will allow us to continue to make debt service payments without having to draw on any state appropriation for 2+ years. I think that's important. Those who went before us and set up this transaction, they set up this excess revenue account for this exact purpose, to have this money set aside should we have a downturn in our economy, and looks like their forward thinking has been quite helpful to us in this. Next slide is state office building. We issued debt on behalf of a number of entities: Department of Administration, Family Social Services, and Department of Corrections. You'll see a number of correctional institutions there. Wabash Valley, those bonds will actually pay off in 2021, so they're almost paid off. Newcastle will pay off in 23. Madison is 2028. Logansport, 2028. Evansville Hospital will pay off in 25. The Department of Corrections energy cost savings leases will pay off in 24. And the only part of this portfolio that has a long date for the payoff is the Neurodiagnostic Institute that was just opened a couple of years ago on Community East Campus. I think from all I have heard over there, it's been a success. Those bonds will not pay off until 2030. We'll continue to monitor that for refunding opportunities. These bonds were issued taxable. We can refund those at any time should the market rates be. I said there'd be a slide on Indiana Bond Bank and moral obligation debt. The Indiana Bond Bank provides assistance to local units of government in funding special projects through the use of bonds, including water and sewer systems and capital improvement and building projects. The Bond Bank special program debt may form a moral obligation, with the state of Indiana providing the issuing organization with more favorable financing terms. So kind of a simple explanation of that is, if we use a water and sewer system, an entity that's unrated could come to the Indiana Bond Bank, ask for the moral obligation to put behind that. They would then get a AA rating on their bonds as opposed to unrated, but that comes with this moral obligation pledge we were talking about. So if for some reason those revenues in that system fall short and there may need to be a draw on a debt service reserve account, then the state would be obligated to appropriate dollars to assist with this until the entity got back on its feet. I will say the bond bank has never had a moral obligation claim since 1984 when they opened. There has been no moral obligation debt issued since September 2009. In 2009, at that point in time, the bond bank's moral obligation debt portfolio was about $500 million. As you can see now, it's about $121 million amongst those different entities. And the pay down right now, I believe, is about $20 to $25 million a year. We have the Recreational Development Commission. We issue debt in partnership with DNR to finance or refinance the cost of acquisition, construction, or renovation of park facilities in the or for the operating of the parks. The payments for these bonds are all made through fees generated by the state park ends. We've not had to utilize any state appropriation backup on, or appropriation on these bonds. It is currently 100% fixed. There's only $9.3 million left. The full portfolio will pay off in 26, but after fiscal year 23, there will only be $1 million of debt outstanding, so the majority will be paid off in fiscal 23. Public-private partnerships is another area where the IFA gets involved. We are required to by statute. IFA entered into a public-private partnership agreement for the East End Crossing project, also known as the Ohio River Bridge project between Jeffersonville and Louisville, as an availability payment structure. That availability payment structure just means that the developer was responsible for building the road, and now they're responsible for operating the road for the next 35 years. If they do that appropriately each quarter, and there are no mishaps, and they're maintaining the road they're supposed to, they would get an availability payment for each quarter. If there's problems, their availability payment is reduced. During the construction process of the bridge, there were also milestone payments made out of this. Milestone payments are similar to the percentage of completion, construction progress. As they hit different milestones or completion dates, they received a portion of their payment for the construction process. We also utilized a loan, and it's a mouthful here, the Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act. I have to say that slowly or I mess it up somewhere, known as TIFIA. This is a federal program that provides a subsidized rates for financing projects like this. We did issue approximately, I think originally it was about $160 million in this TIFIA debt. It's currently down to about $129 million. And since we have just done this in the last couple months, we actually refinanced this TIFIA loan on a taxable basis. Our original subsidized rate on this TIFIA loan was 2.25%, which in 2015, I think, was a pretty darn good rate. We were able to refinance this at a 1.41 and save interest costs by doing that. The ORB project reached substantial completion in 2016. The availability payments we talked about started in 2017. They are adjusted for inflation and, as I mentioned, performance issues. I think this is the last slide here. It just talks through the non-appropriation debt. To revisit, the bond bank also has a program where they issue non-moral obligation debt on behalf of entities. They're a pooling point for local units of government where they can take a number of local units of government and pool them together, provide them a better rate as they're working all together. They currently have about 700 million of bonds outstanding. The majority of those related to a school pension bond program that was done, I think, from about 2002 to about 2006, 2007. The original bond issue for that was about $1.3 billion, so they've obviously been paying those off. Our state revolving fund, which provides subsidized interest rates on loans for both water and clean water, clean sewer, is subsidized by the EPA. We currently have about $1.8 million outstanding. Last year, I believe we closed, I want to get the numbers right, I think it was 680 million in loans, saved about 45 or 50 entities, approximately $167 million in interest costs by providing them those subsidized. The Indiana secondary market for educational loans, they have a small portfolio left that they're paying down based upon the student loans they currently have outstanding. In 2012, the feds changed the rules so the Indiana secondary market for educational loans really is not processing near the volume of loans they have been in the past. They are doing a small amount of private placement or loans as they would like any other bank, and this debt I don't believe fully pays off until approximately 2045 maybe. We've discussed the public university non-fee, this is the fee replacement, and there is non-fee replacement, that's about 1.6 million. Indiana Housing Community Development Authority, 553 million, those are all standalone. The Ports of Indiana has one small bond issue that done about 7 or 8 years ago for about $7.3 million. That's a conduit bond issue. It's actually on the full faith and credit of the underlying entity they issued the debt for, so no exposure to the state of Indiana on that either. Real briefly, quasi-debt, the non-appropriation debt relies on neither the full faith and credit of the state nor any moral obligation. For the bond bank, we still have public finance director oversight. State revolving fund debt does get issued through the IFA with the assistance of a number of folks, including Jim McGough, our director of environmental programs, and Mark Pasquarella, our debt director, who are sitting in the back of the room there in case there are questions I can't answer today. Indiana secondary market for educational loans, they are supposed to let us know if they're going to go out and issue any new debt. Since I've been at the IFA since 2013, there have been no new debt issuance by InvestEd. Public universities we've discussed, they have to come to us, get it reviewed, et cetera. Housing and Community Development Authority, we are a board member and participate in all those discussions for their bond issues. Ports of Indiana, similar to secondary loans, they have to come to us for IFA assistance. And the State Fair Commission, same thing. We work very closely with the State Fair Commission and have a very good partnership with them. I'm going to take a pause there. We worked through the state's debt portfolio. We do have two small appropriations we get each year. I'm going to walk through those and then kind of open it up for questions. There was a water infrastructure assistance fund that was to be set up. It was actually set up in the 2019 budget bill. It appropriated $20 million to create a leveraged loan program for wastewater and drinking water infrastructure. It would be operated by the IFA in partnership with our state revolving fund. It would utilize a leveraging structure similar to our SRF loan program. In our SRF loan program, we get federal funds, leverage those dollars. I think right now is that for every federal dollar we have $3 we include through the state side. So we've taken that $1 and made it $4 by leveraging. Over time, that leveraging of these loans is expected to provide a similar funding mechanism like the SRF model. It will also allow us to fund projects that may not be eligible for SRF federal funding because we no longer have the EPA parameters on this program. The assumptions for this structure is it's a $20 million annual appropriation. I believe as of right now for this next budget year, it's been reduced to 17 million and maybe, and that's where it's at right now for the 15% give back. It could get revisited at a later date. Of that 20 million, 18 million are supposed to be low interest loans, 2 million other financial assistance, meaning grants, et cetera. We utilize these funds to immediately fund needed utility infrastructure project, subject to the legislative conditions. To pledge closed loans, we will pledge closed loans to securitize a bond issue at a future date to accelerate the investment in this program. I think we talk about accelerating and leveraging. What's going to happen over the next few years is we're going to issue $20 million of loans. Doing that with state appropriation dollars. As we continue to build over the course of the next 4 or 5 years, we're going to have $100 million of loans outstanding and cash flows related to those loans that we can now pledge as revenue stream to go out and do another bond issue, and all of a sudden this thing starts growing on itself. Over the next 25 years, given the current interest rate conditions and the demands Jim McGough's environmental programs have, we believe we could turn that $20 million appropriation over the course of 25 years into $1 billion of funds available to local units of government to assist with the water issues we all are aware of that are out there. Last one is we also have a brownfields program. Sorry, I got to put my reading glasses on now. This print got. It's to address petroleum condemnation on brownfield sites, results from leaking underground storage tanks at gas stations and other places that cannot be addressed by the responsible party due to an inability to pay, bankruptcy, or other reasons. These are often called orphan sites. The funding summary program has been funded since 2014. All funding has been through IDEM's Excess Liability Trust Fund. For 2021, The appropriation was $2.5 million for each year, all of which has been allocated to projects. As of September 30th, 94 sites have been approved for funding in 70 communities in 52 counties. 17 million is obligated and 13.2 million already distributed, 68% approved budget. We have issued all kinds of different no further action orders, site status letters. 158 underground storage tanks have been removed and 9 closed in their place. 9 fuel underground storage tanks have been removed. 3 hydraulic lifts have been removed. 66 tons of petroleum impacted soil removed. And almost 400,000 gallons of liquid sludge has been removed. Our request for appropriation this year is similar to 2021, $2.5 million a year for each. With that, I got through my slide deck. Hopefully I didn't go too fast, but I wanted to give you all opportunity for questions. At that point in time, I'm glad to field them along with Mark Pascarella and Jim McGough from our office.
Senator Brown, did you have a question?
So with respect to
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry. So IU earlier this year, their Board of Trustees approved $1 billion line of credit.
Yes.
Where would that be in these? It considered here because they did or did not access it, and how does that affect our credit rating if it does at all?
Right now, if it hasn't, I don't believe it's been accessed yet, so it has no effect on these numbers. Again, as long as that $1 billion line of credit is used on the non-approved. Mark, I don't know, are they utilizing that could they utilize that for the appropriation? That's only for non-appropriation, so I think negligible effect on all those.
This $20 million, the new, what we'll call SRF type of program, who determines and what's the interest rate for that, what's going to be charged? Okay.
I told these guys earlier if there was an SRF or brownfields question, I was going to ask off the answer because I know my lane.
Representative Porter, did you have a question? Senator Mountain.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. Just for the sake of trying to educate myself on the process, how does the rating of individual taxing entities like school corporations or municipalities, if they fail within their rating, does it impact the state overall?
Again, this is my personal opinion. Would have a effect. How big of an effect, I don't know. But when they look at the state of Indiana.
But it wouldn't necessarily lower our score?
Absolutely not.
Okay. And the last question I have, going back to slide 14 with public-private partnerships, are these only state projects, like infrastructure or?
Yeah, the only ones we're allowed to participate in would be state projects related to infrastructure.
Got you. Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Any further questions? Thank you very much, Dan.
Thank you, guys. And you weren't making any faces.
Next person we have scheduled is Ms. Klutz, the Auditor of the State of Indiana.
How you doing? Waiting for somebody to come watch it. All right.
Well, if anybody needs to get up after that presentation and stretch, you can. That was a lot of information. All I heard was that we have a AAA bond rating. Yes, we do have debt. But Mr. Chairman and committee members, thank you so much for letting me present to you today. I really appreciate our relationship with Dan Hughey. He is a fantastic leader of that organization, and he recently was just nominated to be a board member of the Government Financial Officers Association, which is the largest association of government finance officers in North America. And so we are very lucky to have him today. I don't have a PowerPoint. I'm going to try to give you a little time back depending on the number of questions that we have. As Chairman Brown said, my name is Tara Klutz. I am the state auditor, and I've submitted a transmittal letter to go along with my budget request. And so I'm kind of just going to briefly talk about some of those items, but that is primarily what I'm going to be following today. With me, I have Stacy Schneider in the back. She's my chief of staff, and Jared Bond. He is my communications director. My goal is to inform you about what my office does. Many of you know the state auditor is not responsible for auditing the state and local government as we think of auditing today, but instead, I get to serve as the chief financial officer of the state. My goal is to explain some of those things and ultimately tell you how important my small office is to state operations and ultimately substantiate my budget request. I'm responsible for auditing, this is where I get my name from 200 years ago, and paying all of the state's 7.5 million bills, ranging from utility bills at state parks to food service contracts at the Department of Corrections to construction payments with NDOT, as well as to all the tuition support that goes to every single local school in the state of Indiana. Besides paying those bills, I'm also responsible for processing payroll for 30,000 employees accurately and timely, at least they really want it on time. With the passage this year of CARES, much needed bill, however, it created unique challenges for our office. We noticed right away a significant increase in the number of payment requests from state agencies, while the state was reacting and continuing to react to the pandemic and make sure that they are providing a safe and secure environment for our constituents. From a payroll perspective, the CARES Act required businesses with less than 500 people and state and local government, emphasis added, okay, remember I told you we have 30,000 employees, but the CARES Act required businesses with less than 500 employees and state and local government to establish 2 types of emergency leaves with less than a few weeks' notice. These leaves were important because schools were closing and they needed job protections, as well as if you got contact traced or contracted the coronavirus, they wanted to protect your job. So being part of government meant that we needed to offer that leave and figure out how to document and train it in a very short time. And we worked extensively with the state personnel department, which is HR, if you're not familiar with the state. State personnel performs the human resources function for our state. This was challenging. It may be challenging to manually change 500 employees' records, but we had 30,000, so you can imagine our stress levels as we were trying to do this new leave for our employees timely and accurately. And then just recently we found out that those leaves need to be portrayed separately in the W-2, which is not a small feat from my aging payroll system, which I'm going to get into in a minute. But had I not had the flexibility to react and implement those changes in the required time frame, I would have had to go through a lot of hoops to get the money and the resources I needed to make those changes. So I'm very thankful for that. And over the past 4 years, I have proven that I don't spend taxpayer money unless it is warranted. And I've not shied away from reverting anything I haven't spent to the general fund. We will get through this pandemic and its impact on our economy and business operations. And while we're still in the midst of it, I wanted to just let you know that our team has not stopped operating or moving forward with several initiatives that I think are going to make us more effective and efficient as the time goes on. One of my primary goals is financial transparency. It's one of the defining pillars of a successful government, in my opinion. We've enhanced Indiana's transparency portal and continue to do that for all stakeholders, whether you want to know about Indiana finances or local government finances. Our office is also charged with maintaining the centralized accounting system for the entire state of Indiana and producing its comprehensive annual financial report. And just recently, we implemented a new I'm going to put guarantee on quotes, because a new guarantee of payments for the 130 agencies that submit requests to my office. We've said if you submit a voucher for audited approval, we will approve it within 10 days of receipt. And this required my team to be accountable and flexible, as the quantity of vouchers coming into our office fluctuates depending on the agency, the time in the year, and the circumstances involved. And what it did was it took away the uncertainty for the agency of knowing whether it would get paid within 3 days or 25 days, of knowing when it hits the auditor's office, it's going to get paid within 10 days. Now, we are paying a lot sooner, but I still think it was an important change and consistent change for the agencies to depend on. My office and State Personnel Department, along with IoT, are heavily immersed in the implementation of a new HR payroll modernization system. Some of you may recall that the legislature provided $20 million to replace an antiquated DOS-based system in the last biennium. And so we were able to utilize existing PeopleSoft software that we already own the licenses for, and we're able to incorporate a state human resources upgrade, which is really important because we can maximize the effectiveness of the implementation. We're 6 months into this upgrade with the potential go-live date in fiscal year 2022. It's the fall of 2021 to be exact, but it will impact fiscal year 2022. The project is expected to drive significant tangible and intangible benefits, which I can go into more detail if you want to at the end. Another thing that is very important in my office is technology and cybersecurity updates. We're continuously reviewing them and implementing, as we must constantly be vigilant against those who would try to steal our money and resources. And in order to provide the additional security and efficiency, I've been transitioning my office from running its own internal IT department and equipment to utilizing Indiana's Office of Technology and their networks and services and equipment. And this change provided an enhanced cybersecurity as well as more modern equipment and network capabilities. Indiana utilizes the PeopleSoft platform for our finance and now payroll. And in order to fully utilize the functionality of this new platform, we are working with IoT to implement multi-factor authentication, called MFA, because many of our employees will now be able to use a self-service portal to go in and change certain of their personal information. And so in order to just ensure the security of that, we are making a lot of different technology upgrades. We have also reassessed the budget and numerous projects that our office was pursuing and have redirected dollars back into the PeopleSoft program. This has resulted in advancing IoT and the use of different modules within our PeopleSoft platform for paperless AP workflow. This also allowed our accounts payable department to implement paperless vendor forms, and we require emails now. So we used to electronically mail, or we electronically send somebody a payment, but then mail them the EFT notice. So now we are emailing them the EFT notice and paying them electronically. As the state is moving to some of these new systems, it is imperative that we begin a statewide training initiative. And this is the thing I'm fighting so hard to find any kind of excess money in my budget, because right now, my initiative for this training is not fully funded. And so I would never ask for more money considering the circumstances that we face right now. But I will tell you that I'm excited and believe that the statewide training initiative is very imperative if we're going to ensure the new systems deliver the effectiveness and the efficiencies that we've promised. So we've recently partnered with IoT, and we are creating computer-based training modules, which we call CBTs. And this training provides consistency and the required competencies to ensure that the data being input into our system is accurate and standardized. We've also initiated small group training with CFOs and their team for their financial and payroll transactions. This allows our office to rely vital information on how to accurately process finance and payroll transaction, as well as express opportunities for improvement. And last but not least on my training, once we implement the new HR payroll modernization, it will require extensive statewide training, not only for all agency payroll personnel, but each employee who will now have access to perform some of the functions via the self-service portal. That is a large undertaking, and I am excited to do it because I think after we get through that initial bump of training, it's going to reap significant benefits in just human capital. Right now, agency payroll people are processing so much paper, and then they're sending that to my office, and we're processing so much paper. So we're really looking forward to this implementation. Last but not least, you've heard me say this before, a cornerstone of my administration has been the development of a robust internal control department. Since 2018, our internal control department has identified over 240 policies and procedures for our office. Our goal is to reduce risk and error throughout the agency. With millions of dollars at stake, we must balance the use of technological advances with the oversight necessary to combat fraud. As you can see, again, we are a small agency. We are the backbone for state operations. Not only do we pay all the state's bills and its people, but being separately elected allows us to maintain 100% financial transparency and impartiality. It's fiscally responsible to be transparent in government, and vice versa. Being transparent in government encourages leaders to be fiscally responsible. I appreciate the Budget Committee and this legislature's willingness to support my office and our payroll project with a capital appropriation during the last biennium. I know this will be a challenging year for all of us. I have evaluated our expenses and assessed our future needs. I believe the request submitted should meet our needs while allowing us to implement statewide training and pursue systematic efficiencies through the next biennium. I would be happy to take any questions if you have any.
Ms. Klutz, has there been financial pressure on your office as the duties and opportunities for auditors has expanded?
I would say there has been financial pressure on my office, but with our consolidation with IoT, I've been able to transition some of the dollars I would have used on that to helping me function this year, as well as the financial pressure that of salaries. I am having a hard time filling many of my positions that are open. And right now, we're finding the best way to stop fraud before we are able to implement all of these things I talked about is by human capital. And so that's been one of the biggest challenges that I've had in my office.
Is to have the finances to hire more people and hire unfilled positions?
That's correct.
Okay. Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along that line of questioning, didn't just this past year you recently started doing the vendor payments for certain agencies? I know we had a conversation and
So we process almost all of the vendor payments for every agency, with the exception of probably Medicaid, runs through our office. And so in the past, there might have been agreements that there would be different auditing steps at the agency that possibly allowed in the past AOS to just approve, but we've been able to actually stick audit points in all of the vendor payment requests that we get, so we're ensuring we're paying the accurate amounts.
well, I'm talking about, and I apologize, I literally cannot remember, an agency that had a backlog and you stepped in.
Oh, yes. Well, we're continuing to meet with any agencies that we deem possibly with having a little difficulty, and they change all the time, with submitting the appropriate paperwork for auditing. And we are seeing a substantial improvement in the timeliness of those payment requests, as well as the accuracy of what's been submitted to my office.
So who was that? What
Oh,
was
the Department of Child Services.
That's what I thought. I had DCS, but I couldn't remember.
Yes.
So I guess my question then, when you talk about the financial pressure following up, And also, as you are transitioning to the IoT and their IT service, curious in terms of that, how if IoT then bills back for accounting purposes, the various agencies, now yours, and/or to the same point, if you are allowed to quote bill, particularly as you say, it changes and you ramp up because you're not always involved in assisting these other agencies.
Okay, yes, it does make sense. The question was, IoT bills back for a lot of the technology services that they utilize. The auditor state does not at this point. Would agencies be affected in the new, when I do turn over a lot of my IT services over there, as well as just in general paying for banking services? I mean, I am a bill payer, and that is the question. When you are a constitutional office holder, you know, we always struggle with this. Like, I do believe it is my duty to pay the bills and audit them without necessarily charging anybody in particular. I do think as there are different enhancements made to my system, then the line gets a little grayer, and then we want a little more help to pay for those things. But that is a good question. Right now, we are not charging for our services at AOS, and I don't believe the IoT will change when they're using my stuff. In fact, I'm paying for server space, but I'm being able to save money by turning over my stuff because of a quantity discount to IoT, and I'm utilizing that money in my budget.
Okay, and then my final question, follow-up then along that line, though, I would like to know if we can see a commensurate reduction in staff and dollars in the agencies. I may not know that, but that's a question for the agencies.
Well, you know, maybe not full-time staff, but at least their jobs, once this is implemented, should spend less hours on payroll, and there may be, you know, then more hours to be able to train some of their employees or different things on our finance. I found that we are lacking in a systematic training mechanism across the state of Indiana, and that is leading to you know, just extra work, extra communication, and making sure that when there's turnover in agency roles, that whoever's training them is training them in a standardized way. And so I believe we have a long way to go, but we are working on it. And so I do think that there will be more time for those, maybe, you know, they're not actually performing payroll, but they're making it better.
Thank you.
Mr. Jackson.
Actually, this isn't a question for you. I'm going to try to respond a little bit more to Senator Brown's question. One of the really super fun things that we do at the budget agency is called SWICAP, the statewide cost allocation plan. And so the idea there is, how do we recoup back to the general fund expenses that the general fund has, excuse me, for servicing dedicated and federal funds. And so, you know, using DCS as an example, yeah, the auditor could charge DCS, but we'd be kind of taking general fund dollars from one agency and giving it to another agency. Where SWICAP comes into play is with federal funds or dedicated funds. And so we have processes built into place where we are recouping those type of expenses, where we can bill back the federal government for their fair share, as well as for the for dedicated funds, kind of their fair share whether it's, the way I think about it is, you know, you have some agencies that generate their own revenue, like BMV, for example, or maybe even DNR. They're generating revenue, but you have a lot of agencies like the budget agency, like AOS, like the governor's office, things that, or even Medicaid, for example, where they're not collecting revenue themselves. They're spenders of general fund dollars. And so whenever we're servicing agencies that are funded with dedicated or federal dollars, some of the revenue numbers include those. And so
So we basically have the calculations. If we would ever want to charge back, because we already charge federal funds for the time it takes us to process payroll and pay bills, because we're allowed to.
Actually suggesting, actually more like an accounting though, because as the office of the auditor staff responsibilities have increased, and they have, I would like to see the commensurate reduction in staff. Auditor just stated she like to see in hopes that they're doing other things. Have the same staffing in the same position.
Representative Porter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Auditor Coons, earlier in your presentation, you talked about staffing and how you've managed with the current staff you have, and it's hard to bring on staff. But you also said you reverted dollars back to the general budget. Could you tell me how much you have reverted back to the general budget?
This past year, I was able to revert a significant amount of money, close to, I believe, $600,000.
How much?
$600,000 this year. And I haven't seen a reversion like that since I've been here. But once the pandemic hit, I was able to take all of the money that I had saved in that fiscal year and just give it back to the general fund. In previous years, I had reverted similar amounts to a technology fund to supplement the payroll modernization project. And so this year, obviously, I got the $20 million from the state legislature last biennium, so now I have that appropriated, and I was able to revert all the funds that we were not spending to the general fund balance.
So, and it's probably a question that we will deal with later on in the next month or so. So, a friend said that you've worked on 15% less that you were your last biennium. So the $600K that you reverted back, are you going to come back in and ask for the same amount that you did last time, or 15% less than what has been asked of some agencies?
I am asking for the exact same amount that was appropriated me for the last biennium minus the $20 million for the payroll project to be appropriated to me for the next biennium for the exact same reasons that I just went over with you. The things that we needed to do to change the payroll and the CARES Act increases came after June 30th. And so I basically now am running it behind my budget, my current budget that started 7/1/20, if that makes sense. Like, I am on target to spend almost all of my budget for the 6/30/21 timeframe. Yes, yes. Yep.
Well, the first half is gone. Those books are closed.
Yep, and
So
we took every penny of everything and every PO. We were able to go through all old purchase orders, close everything, and find any kind of money we possibly could to get it back to the general fund.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Next, we have Ms. Mitchell, Treasurer of the State.
Thank you. Oh, nice to be able to see all of you. And you're all smiling. There we go. I see eyes crinkling up. That works. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, I'll just jump into my remarks. All right. Well, again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I do appreciate this opportunity to discuss my office's budget proposal for the next fiscal biennium. It is indeed my honor to serve as Indiana State Treasurer. Our office serves every Hoosier in a number of different ways, and every task that we perform carries an impact. The request before you has been prepared to cover the operating expenses necessary to maintain the current level of services for the operations which are prescribed for this office by the Indiana Constitution and the Indiana General Assembly. The Treasurer's Office is a unique constitutional office with unique operational needs. The primary responsibility of the Treasurer of State is the safekeeping and investment of monies paid into the state treasury. By meeting this responsibility, and many others given to this office via statute, the Treasurer of State's office serves the citizens of the state of Indiana, as well as state agencies and local units of government. We are responsible for the investment and accounting of the state's portfolio, including the state's general fund and over 70 trust funds, with an approximate daily average of $9.7 billion. In addition, we are responsible for providing cash management and banking services for the state and its agencies. The Treasurer's Office has earned over $371 million in investment earnings for the state of Indiana during the last 2 fiscal years. Aside from our core functions, we have many additional duties that require administrative, management, and investment oversight. These duties include that I serve as trustee of the Next Generation Trust Fund, the Next Level Indiana Trust Fund, and the Indiana State Police Pension Trust Fund. I serve as chair of the Indiana Bond Bank, the Indiana Education Savings Authority, the Indiana Able Authority, and the Indiana State 911. And I administer and invest the Indiana Grain Indemnity Fund, the Common School Fund, the Public Deposit Insurance Fund, and the Major Moves Construction Fund. I also serve as an ex officio member on a number of other state boards and commissions. Finally, the office serves as the administrator of the state's local government investment pool, Trust Indiana. I'm proud to highlight a few of the accomplishments of our team over the past biennium, but for a comprehensive report on the activities and accomplishments of the Treasurer's Office, please refer to my annual report to the Governor. 2020 marked another year of significant growth and enhancement of the Indiana's Tax Advantage College Choice 529 Savings Plan. Plan assets now total over $5.4 billion, which is an increase of more than $2.5 billion during my tenure. 390,000 accounts have been opened to date, and these accounts grow tax-free as long as the money is withdrawn to pay for qualified education expenses. 911 service has been available to Hoosiers for more than 50 years. Indiana was the second state in the country to successfully complete a 911 call, and we continue to model national leadership as we strive to implement the best possible 911 solutions for people in our state. Last year, 272,596 text sessions to and from 911 were reported across the state, making up 7% of the interactions that Hoosiers had with their public safety answering points. You will note that prepaid 911 fees are a separate line item in our budget request. These fees come from prepaid phones and are collected by the Department of Revenue and transferred to the 911 board. The $14 million figure is an estimate based on past revenue. The purpose of the Trust Indiana program is to provide Indiana local units of government the opportunity to invest in a common pool of investment assets that preserves the principle of public funds, remains highly liquid, and maximizes the returns. Trust Indiana ended the fiscal year with $1.87 billion in assets and paying a basis points of 0.26. That is an increase of $440 million in assets over the last fiscal year. 3 years ago, our office announced the launch of Invest Able Indiana Savings Plan. Built upon the provisions of the Federal ABLE Act of 2014 and unanimously passed by the state legislature, thank you all, in Indiana in 2016, our ABLE authority oversees the administration of savings accounts for individuals with disabilities to provide for their futures and pay for disability-related expenses without endangering access to other vital public benefits. The Indiana Able Authority has seen exciting and meaningful growth in the plan this biennium. Currently, we have over 650 accounts open and almost $4.5 million in assets under management. The average account balance is around $6,600. We are requesting $285,500 for fiscal year 2022 and $294,000 for fiscal year 23. This average account balance of $6,600 far exceeds the $2,000 federal resource limit, which once dictated how much individuals with disabilities can save. And the last 2 years have been very productive for the Indiana State Police Pension Trust. Its customized investment structure and oversight have been a key contributor to increasing its funded status to a healthy 78%, which is up from 73.2% in 2019. And the Indiana Bond Bank has served over 752 Indiana qualified entities through its programs. The primary mission of the Bond Bank, of which I serve as chair, is to assist local units of government in the process of issuing debt. And the Bond Bank serves Indiana's cities, towns, townships, libraries, counties, public schools, county hospitals, and public universities. The Indiana Bond Bank pivots to meet the needs of local communities in times of need. A great example of that is our advanced funding program. This year, in 2019, that program totaled $461,000. This year, it totaled $82 million. Our biennium budget request for Treasury operations, together with our request for ABLE, totaled just over $1.6 million each in fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23 to continue the funding of the office at levels necessary to maintain our operations. This request will help the office continue to operate in a way that minimizes risk of spreading our small staff too thinly and maximizes our ability to perform our fiduciary duties. The Treasurer of State's office will continue providing Hoosiers with efficient and effective state government. I will uphold my fiduciary duties while investing in safeguarding public funds, overseeing the management of the state's financial assets, and providing accurate and timely funding to state and local stakeholders. We will continue delivering each of our programs to the individuals and entities they were created to serve in accordance with the law and at the levels of excellence they have come to expect. If I may, I want to take this moment to thank my amazing staff. Despite the tremendous challenges we faced this year, my team has not missed a beat. Indeed, they have adapted, evolved, and done more than I thought possible. I am extremely proud of them and the work they do for us all. I know that every dollar my office earns in interest income for the state is one less dollars that taxpayers have to pay in taxes to fund government services. The roles and responsibilities of the Treasurer's Office are critical to Indiana's fiscal health. For the aforementioned reasons, I respectfully request the appropriation as presented on our agency operating account summary for the 2022 through 2023 biennium. My Chief Deputy Mike Frick, Deputy Ryan Locke, and I are here to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions? Senator Brown.
Chairman, first of all, thank you for the investable. Done a great job. I'm curious, we had a conversation a couple years ago about that. You have 650 accounts now. I think at one point you had projected how many you thought you could potentially have.
Oh, that's a great question, Senator. I believe we had an estimated pool. Shoot, Ryan, do you remember that estimated pool?
That high, 80 to 100? Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And my last question is, with respect to the state police fund, so you're now funded at 78%, and you've had an annual net return of 5%, but can I, and you don't have to give it to me today, I'd like a breakout of your fees and how they compare. Why is it only 78%? To be honest, presentation, but for the prosecutors, you're actually funded less than any of our.
We absolutely would be glad to get you the breakdown of those fees. And I will just point out that implementing the new pay matrix over the last couple of years is what dropped the funded status of the ISPPT. I think it was over 80 down to 73.2% last year, but has rebounded very successfully already to just barely below 78% this year, and we expect it to continue.
Well, if our pay increase, which we allocated, I think two, affected it, was it two? Okay, then wasn't there a commensurate increase?
Ryan, do you want to answer that?
Okay, not to belabor the point, and I know you're a smaller fund than others with this, but it would certainly be nice to see it above 78% into the 90%. So your goal is to get to the 90s. Okay. Okay, well, to that point, to be honest, I thought their last pay raise was, to your point, a long time coming. I may not be here in 10 years, but I sure hope that's not when you're readjusting your. Flip side is, your investment rate of return is pretty conservative. You're still, I think, underfunded, and so I would hope that you would be more aggressive in anticipating that, not assuming that they're not going to get a pay raise for. This is what my point is. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Thank you, Senator.
Further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is due at 2:30. We have a little bit. Oh, they're here. I didn't. Okay, so we'll go early. Thank you. I don't see Secretary of State Lawson. You don't look like Connie Lawson.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I understand I don't have to wear my mask? Bear with me one second. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. My name is Brandon Clifton. I serve as Chief of Staff and Deputy Secretary of State for Secretary of State Connie Lawson. Secretary Lawson apologizes for her absence today. She was preparing for the Electoral College this morning, which went fantastic, went very well. States around the country are doing the same and selecting their or certifying their electors for Congress over the coming days. So a little bit about the Secretary of State's office before I go into budget proposals. One, we are, of course, we have the election division in the office, which is responsible for supporting the administration and the county's administration of elections. Two, we have the business services division. The budget committee, budget makers appropriated made a capital appropriation to the secretary in 2015 for the development of InBiz, Indiana's business one-stop portal. So we have a fantastic staff with our business services team and haven't missed a beat through this pandemic, whereas other states around the country have been crippled by the lack of technology that has been invested in their business services functions and responsibilities. Three, we have the Auto Dealer Services Division. We're responsible for working with enforcing statutes with regard to auto dealer manufacturers and auto dealers. And then four, we have our Securities Division, which serves as our white-collar crime unit for the state's interests. And then also we've over the last couple years, and in light of election security and in responding to election security threats, we've become a larger player and a larger state office when it comes to local government, election security, and also local government security, and I'll speak more about that today. So let's talk about the Secretary's proposal in this biennium. You know, we recognize the fact that this body, appropriators, need the resources to respond to this pandemic and support Hoosiers, which are suffering right now. And I think, you know, economic difficulties are going to continue to come, regardless how soon and how quickly we're able to eradicate this virus. Recognizing that, the Secretary has examined her budget and made available, consistent with the requests made of the governor of the executive agencies, we've shot for a 15% reduction in general funds that are appropriate to the office. So one, in this fiscal year and in the next fiscal year, we propose 14.4% cuts to voter outreach and education. We anticipate an additional 1 to 3% to be cut by way of reversion as we get into the third quarter and the fourth quarter of this fiscal year. Now, we would use that money this next fiscal year to start buying ads and outreach opportunities for the 22 election, because if you wait until the election year, you're going to get priced out. So we would, even though there's not an election next year, we would have used those funds to do that outreach and make those buys. Recognizing that, you know, we can do more and focus more on earned media opportunities, operating funds that we have available to us. We can continue to make an impact on voter registration, voter outreach, voter awareness by way of sweat equity, if you will. And so we see that as the first opportunity to reduce. In fiscal year 23, we cut 8% of that voter outreach appropriation and reserve $400,000 for potential outreach in the general of 22, which would be in the first half of fiscal year 23. However, as we saw this year, turnout, and as we've said in years past, turnout is driven by candidates and issues. We certainly had some candidates this year, and we certainly had some issues that needed to be resolved this year. So we anticipate similar activity, energy in the election space in 22, and so we will identify opportunities, probably online outreach, some news media outreach and media buys, with that $400,000 in the general. Again, additional opportunities for reversion in other operating depending on election security costs at that time. And then the Secretary is also responsible for submitting the budget of the Indiana Election Division. We propose 12% cuts in voterless maintenance appropriations in FY '21 and '22. Although I think no, that is correct. And we believe that we can conduct a limited but a still effective voterless maintenance campaign by way of the reduced appropriation, contract encumbrances, and purchase orders that we have available. Let's talk a little bit about election security. Oh, and also on voterless maintenance, we're in the midst of litigation, so there may be no voterless maintenance over the biennium. We'll just have to depend on what that litigation comes out to be through the spring of '21 and potentially into the summer of '21. Election security capital appropriation. Secretary requested and was appropriated a $10 million election security capital appropriation in 2019. Make no mistake, we have seen advanced persistent threat actors this year. We saw them last year, and advanced APTs is a term I wasn't aware of a couple years ago, but it seems we use it on a daily basis now. Those are your nation states, highly sophisticated, highly organized, highly disciplined organizations that sought to interfere by way of social media or hard target interference in 2016, and the MO and the activity continues. So we have stopped that activity. We can see that activity. We can see where it's coming from, and we have categorized it into one of 4 low, medium, high critical levels of severity, if you will. Year-to-date activity includes 20,000 endpoints. Those are devices, your computers, with counties, and over 100 network sensors with the counties. We have stopped nearly 200,000 alerts. Approximately 12,500 of those have been critical to major alerts. As of the general, 84 counties had partial or full implementations. A couple other bullet points I want to hit before I come back to additional comments about local government cybersecurity. 5 of the 10 million that was appropriated in 2019 was used to upgrade equipment in our counties, and some of those upgrades included the addition of a voter verifiable paper audit trail. So about half of our counties are supported by Microvote. It's an Indiana company, actually based out of Broad Ripple here in town. A fantastic company. All 4 of our election tabulation vendors here in the state are incredible. But recognizing that this is a preferred option of our counties, Microvote has available what we call a direct record electronic. It has no paper component to that tabulation. So recognizing coming out of 2016, 2018, voters wanted to see that piece of paper I could audit, I could review, something tangible I could see to verify that my electronic submission was indeed recorded accurately. So legislature funded upgrades to that equipment with a plug-and-play solution. Plugs right into the existing equipment, and a voter can see. It looks like a coin telephone size, if you will, like we see in our kiosks outside. It has paper on the inside. You make your selections. It prints your selections in a contained device, so the voter can't take it with them, but they can see that my selections were indeed captured correctly. We use that paper and the paper that's used in our other counties, like ES&S counties or our HART counties, and we conduct risk-limiting audits, post-election audits with that paper. We do this in partnership with Ball State voting system, VSTOP voting system technical oversight program. Since 2018 and between 2018 and to January of 2021, we will have conducted 11 risk limiting audits 2018 counties included Marion and Porter County. 2020 counties, 4 after the primary and 5 after the general. The 5 after the general should be complete by within January. Include LaPorte, Elkhart, Jay, Cass, Madison, Bartholomew, Marion, Vigo, and Brown. So at the beginning of 2021, we will have conducted risk limiting audits or post-election audits in all of our congressional districts, at least one in each congressional district. And we will have conducted a post-election audit using all type of equipment in the state of Indiana. And that's important because we eventually want to hand off the responsibility to conduct a risk limiting or a post-election audit to the counties. So it's absorbed as part of the normal course of election administration. The purpose of an RLA is to take a sample of ballots and audit those to compare those to the overall outcome of that particular election. So you can take a sample and within certain degrees of statistical significance and confidence, conclude that the outcome of that election for that particular race was indeed correct, or has a 99.9% of being correct, or whatever risk limit you want to assign to that audit. We've also conducted incident response planning with IU's Center for Applied Cybersecurity Research. So those are the main components that we want to report on coming out of the capital appropriation made in 2019. Now, do want to go back up to that first bullet point. We work with, and it's public, work with a company by the name of FireEye, a national, if not a worldwide leader in this space, in endpoint and server detection of activity, of malicious activity, if you will. Now, on Tuesday of last week, FireEye reported, quote unquote, a breach of their, what we call their red team materials. Red team assessments are used as a self-examination tool to determine what your weak points are, to what your vulnerabilities are. So you hire a company and they tell you how they would attempt to compromise your assets. We've conducted similar risk limiting audits with the Federal Department of Homeland Security and 2 other vendors in 2020 alone. So what FireEye reported last year had nothing to do with the endpoint protection that the Secretary has made available to the counties. Does that mean that we have a brand problem or need to examine the project? Absolutely. It's always good to look in the mirror and assess whether your path is the right path in light of what's been learned. We also I learned last night that root cause for this compromise is by way of the supply chain. Microsoft engineers have publicly said they've never seen a compromise to some of their authentication tools. They've publicly said this than what we saw last week in the FireEye disclosure. We are talking the most, when we say advanced persistent threat actor, we have not been told which nation state is responsible, but have every belief it's one of the largest ones in the space. So never seen these tools before, never seen this discipline before, never seen this operational security before. The best of the best, I think, is what's going to come out of this report, having compromised that red team asset that FireEye holds so dear. What's also scary is, and as we turn back to some of the outreach we do with the counties coming out of the news of FireEye, the supply chain vendor that is probably the root cause of this and how advanced persistent actors compromise the FireEye's assets, more than 425 of Fortune 500 companies use this vendor, President of the United States, Navy, Microsoft, AT&T. So we're talking a very, very large customer base that is going to have a lot of work to do. So I say that, one, to report it in full disclosure, two, to separate that what the Secretary and election security resources have been made available to the counties is completely separate from what was reported last week in those red team tool compromises. What FireEye did in response, they distributed all known signatures, complete transparency as to how to detect any activity associated with those red team tools, and they basically completely burned the asset by way of making it publicly available. So we're doing some brainstorming this week. Wanted to get through the Electoral College and comments this afternoon, but had great conversations with counties, had some very, very challenging, difficult, but responsible discussions with counties. And so we're going to continue to make an informed decision and recommendation as to what to do going forward. Switch to election and COVID-19 response. So first, we postponed the primary from May to June 2nd. We knew so much less, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, than what we do now. Everything was still new, becoming more acclimated to the realities that we face in light of this pandemic. And so I think looking back, one of the best things we did was just buy some time. That month was critical in understanding what we could do, how we could respond, and what resources we could make available to the public for a safe and secure election. Introduced no-fault absentee for the primary, online absentee ballot requests using driver's license and Social Security, last 4 digits of the Social Security number, and provided optional multi-factor authentication on an individual's voter registration. The general election, we just much more, I think, comfortable is probably the wrong term, but cognizant of where we were and how we could conduct an election in light of how we conducted it in the primary, how other states conducted it in their primaries, and really just saw a normal election for the general. So, but what we did do, and I do want to share this, we actively saw an advanced persistent threat actor. And one thing we're going to do after this week is provide all legislators a cybersecurity profile of their district, what the level of involvement is, the type of alerts we've seen, the countries that we're seeing them come from. I think it'll be rather illuminating and informative with regard to the activity of your district. So just this last bullet point, we saw 800 and shared 800 IP addresses, some associated with, what we call the Big Four: the Russia, the China, North Korea, the Irans, a lot of domestic activity. Long gone are the days of, some guy in his mother's basement. These are major actors, government-sponsored actors. There's some insight into PPE and voter turnout. And one thing that I failed to reference on the budget cut slide, we're reverting all of voter outreach that was appropriated in this fiscal year because we were able to use federal CARES funds for voter outreach. PPE, you see some of the distribution here. A member of our staff just received what we call the NAS Medallion Award, the National Association of Secretaries of State Award. Goes to one person in the state. Our general counsel, just in light of his experience from New Orleans, where he is from, and Katrina, he relocated to Indiana after Katrina. He worked a lot in acquiring this equipment, resources in a time of need and urgency and quite frankly, desperation during Katrina. And just was really able to tap into that experience in acquiring PPE for Indiana's election without disrupting first responder supply channels. And turnout, 65%. The highest turnout we've seen since 1992. And I just draw to your attention 2020 and 2016, you see almost the inverse in in-person versus early absentee in those 2 years. 39% in-person in 2020, 61% in early/absentee versus 67 and 33 respectively. Just a couple of slides of PPE and working with the National Guard to distribute to the counties. It was fantastic to work with those tremendous leaders with the National Guard. Just another picture of Secretary of State. When you see it in pictures, one thing. When you see it throughout a warehouse, it's just an enormous amount of PPE that was distributed. And I think this is probably my last slide. Just a quick comment about our other divisions and how they responded. We used the authority of the office and then also made recommendations to the governor to help Indiana businesses and to support Indiana businesses during this pandemic. We extended the expiration of interim plates with our auto dealer folks, securities division. We went virtual, but we were still able to conduct exams and investigations. And then business services, just a fully operational call center. And then that second one is probably the biggest, provided reinstatements to businesses so that they were eligible for PPE loans. I think I'll conclude there. Not sure how long I went. Chairman?
Thank you. Any questions? Representative Hamilton.
Thank you, Chairman Brown, and thank you, Brandon, for your presentation. I just have two things. One, I just want to share, I look forward to seeing the cybersecurity snapshot of my district. I'm sure we all do.
Yes,
That should be very informative and interesting. On this slide about election security, the capital appropriation, I have a question about the VVPATs.
ma'am.
Do you know what % of machines now have the paper trail?
Yes, I would say 30% of our microvote DREs have a paper trail. We are actively resetting, because one thing that I should have mentioned, before COVID, we were on pace to replace 12 of our 14 counties with brand new equipment. So they're currently using either a Dominion or a HART, antiquated but safe election tabulation equipment. In light of COVID, I said, no, we need to give folks more time. The priority is COVID, not distributing new equipment before the primary or the general election. So we are working with counties to distribute that new equipment in 2021, adjusting some figures based on turnout in the general this year. But I think after that, we could see maybe in 40 to 50%. But after we know those calculations, I'd be happy to give you firm data on what that VVPAT percentage is.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yep. Well, I think your point's well taken, and that's why part of that election security appropriation went to risk limiting and post-election audits, because even with a percentage of equipment with a paper trail, we're able to draw conclusions about the entire election that was conducted partially on electronic equipment and partially with electronic equipment with the VVPAT, and derive confidence that the overall outcome of that election is in fact correct.
Further questions? Senator Melton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. On slide 1, when we talk about the budget reductions, I was just curious, what's the total budget for the line item for voter outreach?
There, in fiscal year, this fiscal year and the next one, all of voter outreach will be eliminated. So there won't be a request. We're proposing that there not be an appropriation in fiscal year 22, and all of FY21 voter outreach will revert, that which we've already received. In FY23, that will be a $400,000 request.
what was the previous spending?
Oh, 750,000 per fiscal year.
And the bullet point with 8% cut, it says potential opportunities for reversion depending on candidates and issues. I'm trying to understand that better.
Yeah. Candidates and issues, the Secretary has long said candidates and issues drives turnout. That's what we saw this year around the country. And how we have used voter outreach is to drive awareness for voter registration, for relevant dates in the election cycle. So depending on what we assess to be, and it's an intangible assessment, but what we assess to be the energy of those candidates and issues in going into the 2022 election cycle, we'll be in a position to better predict the use of that 400,000 in the general election of 22.
Gotcha. For, on the slide for the 61%, I believe that's an increase in terms of early and absentee voting. Did you see a fluctuation in your budget or spending because of that increase?
We look to CARES. We received $10 million in CARES funding to respond specifically to elections in light of COVID. So we use that funding to respond and to develop online absentee request, which is still available and will always be available so long as, well, it's fully funded, so I don't see that going away anytime soon. We deployed the security behind online absentee, the DLN, the SSN4. So we did not use state funds to respond to the increased absentee turnout. We used federal funds to do that since it was available, and we had to use it by the end of the year.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
At this time, I would like to invite Chief Justice Rush up. Podium's wiped down. Thank you.
Good afternoon and welcome back. Nice to see you all. On behalf of the Indiana Supreme Court today with me, in the last couple budget cycles, in the last 6 years, we've reorganized the court. We've reorganized the court so we're on a business model. So this is our Chief Administrative Officer, Justin Faulkner, our General Counsel, Aaron Johnson, and our Chief Fiscal Officer, Aaron Hood. So they are here with me today. So interesting times, courts are open, serving the public. This is what our oral arguments look like every Thursday. A lot of our courts have also gone remote. We have had a number of jury trials throughout the year, in-person jury trials, or in-person trials when required. Last year we had 1.2 million cases filed. Again, during 2020, been both remote and in-person. So the pandemic did not stop the work of the court. They've been open. The Constitution requires they be open, and they've been open throughout. So 1.3 million in the trial courts, about 4 million in the appellate courts. The Supreme Court, the Court of Appeals, the tax court have been holding remote until we can get back in the courtroom. We have tough decisions to make, and we want you to know that we're doing our part during these hard times. There are a lot of emergency orders that we had to do. There's things like signing wills, doing depositions. If the statute says it has to be done in person, we had to do some emergency work, so we'll be asking the legislature about that this year. We will have no new budget requests from the Indiana Supreme Court this year. We will have increased needs and expenses going forward. The courts did not qualify for CARE. We did not get a separate designation for CARE funding. Some of the counties got it, but we didn't. So with regard to purchasing Zoom licenses, getting equipment, we've really been patching together. Just recently, with more courts having to go remote, we located 200 used laptops so we could send staff to work remote and keep the hearings open. So we also have a promise that we're going to commit all our pandemic savings. There are some savings we've had during the pandemic, and that as we did in our June, we will revert all of our pandemic savings to the general fund. So what does that look like? We had part of what we do in the administration of justice constitutionally, we educate judges, probation is under the courts, we educate probation officers, we educate court employees. We had like the jail overcrowding task force. We funded pretrial release training. We had to cancel all those trainings and go virtual. But luckily, being lawyers, we had negotiated good force majeure clauses in, so we were able to get significant savings. We've reverted all of that back, and we will continue to do that. So with limited office operations, limited trainings, limited travel, we were able to put together money, and we hope to be able to revert the same. We were actually able to revert 11% of our operating funds. Now, that doesn't include the judges and the prosecutor salaries. Prosecutor salaries are sort of a flow-through in our budget, but we will revert those, the ones that are that we cut back during the pandemic. Technology, those of you that have been in, serving for a while know that court technology has waxed and waned over the years, but because of your funding, we were able to keep open. One of my first phone calls when the pandemic hit, I called former Chief Justice Shepard and Justice Sullivan and thanked them for the work that they did, that we were able to have 24/7 access to the court. We went paperless within a matter of 5 years, and we will be done with Odyssey in a short period of time. So you could pull up your phone and look at your case at any time. So it's been really transformative, and I will say Indiana was just right out at the forefront with regard to being ready for the pandemic and having court cases go. You've got child protection hearings, you've got protective orders, you've got initial hearings in criminal cases, you've got guardianship cases. The pandemic has bred a whole slew of litigation, and there's actually a tsunami. There's going to be a mountain of litigation coming as we gradually get back to normal, so the technology's really helped. So what are we doing with court technology? There's things that you've asked us to do, and there's things that we're doing because we've got the infrastructure to do it. So just last year, 76,000 traffic tickets were paid online, and that's through court technology. 40,000 more marriage licenses issued. Criminal dispositions sent to state police. Criminal fees and fines are paid online. So these are just some of the driver's convictions are done. So these are thanks to court technology, because that is a big part of our funding is court technology and keeping these things going. Risk assessment tools, sharing data with the Indiana Department of Corrections. There's about 200,000 risk assessments, 19,000 just from the DOC alone were posted last year. So public access to online court proceedings is huge. When the pandemic hit, we procured hardware and over 800 enterprise Zoom licenses at a cost of about $200,000 and made them available to trial courts to keep the hearings open. Courts have to be open, so you can't just have a Zoom hearing and not let the public see. So we built a platform, so if you go to our website and you want to watch a hearing in your county, you can, in your county's live streaming, you can do it. Some states were putting on YouTube. My judges were like, I don't want to put it on YouTube. So we have it. And it's really interesting, the transparency now. There's like one jury trial up in Whitley County, 1,000 people watched. So I like the idea people can get engaged with the courts. If you want to find out what's going on in a court, you can pull in. You can only watch the hearing during the time of the hearing. Like all the Supreme Court oral arguments, you can pull up any of those and watch it at any time. But you'll see that there's just a large number of Zoom hearings going on around the state because we didn't want people working remotely, and then how do we adjust for the constitutional responsibility of having our courts open to the public. So I have had judges write, but for court technology and us trying to locate some, we would be stalled or stopped. And you think about somebody with regard to the types of issues that bring people to court, our courts have to be open. We've got to meet that's 1.3 million issues. 2 sides are on every case. It's very important that we do. So we're live streaming, and that number's probably even dated. So 13,000 live stream hearings through it. And that's some WebEx, some Zoom. It depends on that. Here's the Odyssey growth. It shows where we were in 2014, where we are now. And we didn't have to mandate it. All counties agreed to this, and we've got the last couple counties coming on in 2021. So that will be done. And that means a judge in Vanderburgh County can find out if there's a warrant or a case pending against somebody in Jennings County. And the information on Odyssey goes to my case. So if you have a constituent or you want to look up something going on, I looked up my son, I checked out my kids, I found out my son had a traffic ticket I didn't know about on my case, but you can pull it up and look at it free. For a lot of litigants, instead of missing work, going down to the courthouse and looking if you've been in a courthouse, it can be just hard rubric to get through sometimes. For somebody trying to run in there during a work day to figure out what's going on, they're able to do it. And now a lot of people are doing hearings on their phones. And the turnout rate on Chin's cases right now is higher in the remote hearings than it was before, according to several of the judges talking about it. So public access to online documents, these are the things that are looked at. 92% of newly filed cases are in the Odyssey case management. 76 million documents are e-filed. Think of 76 million documents that are all several pages each. It's like rooms and rooms. And these are savings to, I asked DCS one time, what do you think you're saving by the fact you can do electronic filing and you don't have to have that caseworker standing over that copy machine all day? It was in the millions. Attorney General's office in the millions. So all of this public access and the fact things are going electronically saves the government a tremendous amount. 28 million visits to my case, 28 million Hoosiers looking up their cases or looking up a case in my case. 12 million documents were downloaded, appellate briefs filed electronically. We also have, using court technology to promote public safety. All community corrections, the Department of Corrections have a community supervised release system that we built and we're implementing right now to manage pretrial and post-conviction defendants. There's a lot you'll hear about or you've heard about with regard to pretrial reform. Low-risk, nonviolent offenders shouldn't sit in jail because they don't have funding. But that judge needs as much information as possible, so we built a system. So you've got the risk assessment, but you've also got the system to get that information. So you're able to safely contain them in the community. It's a huge part of criminal justice reform on tracking that. So we have that. Only 2 counties in Indiana do not have community correction systems, but we have built and released, and they're being utilized by 90 of those counties right now. Problem-solving courts, when I was reviewing it for my State of the Judiciary, 85% of participants in problem-solving courts do not get arrested. That's great with regard to a low recidivism rate. So we have made a commitment in Indiana to greatly grow our problem-solving courts. These are veterans courts, family recovery courts, drug courts. We are working with the VA now, and you asked us to do this, and this is, again, we use technology. When somebody who's a vet gets arrested and they're in jail, and last year we identified 12,500 in the criminal justice system who may be eligible for VA services or veterans court participation. So instead of waiting to find out somebody's a vet as they work their way through or sitting in pretrial, we are identifying them and getting them located into services. So we have 14 more problem-solving courts, and that's something that sort of was a savings this year that will start up again, that we reverted because as we go out to the field and certify these problem-solving courts, they are effective. The family recovery courts that are in this are in Chin's cases. When can you safely leave a child with a parent while they're going through treatment? And I knew how we have right now 15 family recovery courts, 6 more are planning. They've got a high success rate, and instead of some of the increased expenses that would come from long-term, out-of-term placement, both the expense on the physical and then emotional with regard to the family, we're seeing some great success on that. I know a large bit of the budget goes to Department of Child Services. These are the number of kids, the Gal Casa program. In the last 2 years, we had 9,200 volunteers advocating for 50,000 children. Quite often children just aren't in the system for 1 year. So this is a volunteer program where this funding is, and I think we've grown from 70-some counties to 86 have certified Gal Casa programs. Elder Hoosiers in need. We're seeing more and more cases of elder abuse. Last year, there were 40,000 reports of elder abuse. We have established guardianship offices, so it's like a CASA, but it's called a VASIA, and it's a volunteer for endangered adults. We had banks that would contact us and say, we have drug-seeking family members draining adult bank accounts, and where can we put some protections? We have VASIAs in place. We also have and built a guardianship registry so that if somebody is in a doctor's office or needs help or assistance, they can pull up and see that this person is under a guardianship and who that guardianship is. And I can't remember the millions of dollars worth of assets we have identified in that. Language access needs were required under law. So here are the numbers of interpreters that have been provided, 50 different spoken languages and sign language in Indiana. So we've taken we have a language line, and we're also doing video remote interpreter services. We're hoping that that will save money, that the interpreter doesn't have to go there. We're able to bring them in remote, and we're working on that now. I talked about increase in litigation. There's going to be an increase, and you'll probably hear about this in session, of there's probably going to be commercial COVID litigation, other commercial business versus business. We've made it a priority to develop commercial courts in Indiana. And it's a business-to-business model. It's not a business versus little guy model. It's that. The docket makes it more attractive to businesses by offering efficient and predictable resolutions to disputes quickly. We met with general counsel from around the state, and their number one concern was sometimes not what the end result of the case was, it's just how long it took and how expensive it was. So we have taken our commercial courts and we have added 4 new counties, Vigo, Hamilton, Madison, and St. Joe. We already trained judges in Marion, Lake, Vandenberg, Elkhart, Floyd, and Allen. And in Indiana, under our venue rules, you might be a business in Monroe County, you can still file your case in a commercial court. If the parties have to agree, it could be venued out if there's an objection, but you have access to any business to business litigation. And I think this is really important for businesses as they get tied up in litigation so they can make decisions with regard to personnel and growth. So we have not, this is not funded at all. I have asked for this funding in the past. We're patching it together best we can, but we're dedicated to continue to growing the commercial courts. We're also looking at, we started this before the pandemic, and actually the year before, in 2019, I said there was a pandemic summit, believe it or not, for the judiciary, and I sent a team to it. Thank goodness. Go figure we would have a pandemic the year after we sent a team. But we also had a lot of ideas with regard to innovation. What is the legal system going to look like? What could we possibly do with online dispute resolution? Instead of having 200 small claims cases set in the morning, what if they could solve it? You know, eBay uses online dispute resolution in the millions. So we're looking at online. We're looking at changing family law cases, making them more efficient, sort of having a triage those cases based on the level of conflict and whether the parties are present. So you'll be hearing more about online dispute resolution, because the goal is to save time and cost for the parties, to make courts more efficient and accessible to everyone. We don't want people to lose faith in the courts because the issues are so important that they bring before us. So we have a lot of innovations. And then as I'm winding down, every year there seems to be legislation where you ask us, you know, will you develop this? One was a child abuse registry that you said, you know, we want Department of Education to know if somebody's got a child abuse conviction, so we built it, we have it available. We just built a landlord-tenant facilitation program, which is free and it's online. We're a landlord-tenant. We think when the federal moratorium ends that there's going to be more of those cases. So we built it. We've got 60 to 70 trained facilitators, senior judges, attorneys, and both the landlord-tenant have to want to do it. We've had 246 cases filed. I'm hoping we see more because you've got to get the parties to agree. But we are working through it, and I'm hoping that it's a nice step where there can be either a payment plan done, a case can move out so that person doesn't have that eviction on their record, because it's very hard to get housing when you have that eviction. So we built this, we've got the mediators trained, we're ready to go. The protective order registry has it's just done. The mental health report to the FBI, you see that it says NPLEX down there. You had asked us with regard to national precursor, if somebody has got a drug conviction and they go into CVS to get a drug, a Sudafed, or something that's used to build Metafed, it stops that sale. Sounds simple, but it's so many sales have been stopped based on just taking that court data and putting it with that. Convictions to the Bureau of Motor Vehicle, the supervised release system, the public defender needed technology. You asked us if we would build theirs. Last year, you set up a new administrative law office, and you asked us if we would build their court system, and we did. So we stand ready on anything that we can help the legislature with, that we can build within these applications with the infrastructure. It's important, and we'll continue to do it. So serving Hoosiers through the judicial branch, our resources are, devoted to ensuring fair, impartial, and open access to the courts. We enjoy our partnership with the executive and legislative branch. It was a long, quiet period. It's good to have you back. Any drop in funding would impact Indiana courts that provide these essential services. There's an annual report that's linked. So there's an annual report that shows all the different work in a lot more detail, and it was laid out in a lot more detail in the budget letter as well. The Indiana Judicial Branch operates on less than 1% of the total state budget, and that includes like prosecutor salaries. I mean, that's, if it's actual or operating fund, it's quite a bit less than 1%. Again, I've met with the budget agency. We've brainstormed different ways of reverting. We're not, obligated each year to revert back what we have extra, but I feel it's good government that you don't spend what you don't need to spend. You don't prepay for things particularly when the state is in the situation the state is in, given the pandemic. So that concludes mine. Thank you, Chairman Brown.
Do we have questions? Senator Brown.
Just quickly, I appreciate the changes that you've made and adapted. So to be clear then, no courts were ever closed, they just all went online?
Yes. If a court closed and said we're all sick with COVID, then we would look to find a senior judge and find somebody else to pick up those hearings.
Or like in Allen County, they're closed now because we're red, but they're
jury,
not.
They halted jury trials, but they're all online. They're either online or in person. Because I've issued emergency orders throughout, and they're all ordered to stay open. If they've got to go remote, but you've got to be open.
Okay, and so as we get out of this pandemic, what are some of these, for example, as an attorney, you're allowed to do more CLE online, there have been extensions, you made some radical changes to the bar exam this summer. So what of those sorts of changes are going to be permanent?
I think the idea that transparency and efficiency are important. The courthouses will open, contested hearings should come back. There's a lot of deadlines, particularly if somebody's sitting in jail waiting for the trial. We've got to get our jury trials going again. It's just right now we had a number of cases where there were mistrial, where jurors came down with COVID and other parties were infected. We just have to stop it for 2 months and then start it back up again, hopefully that we'll move in that. Whether we look at changing, it's Administrative Rule 14, which allows us to do remote hearings. When can you do a remote hearing so everybody doesn't have to drive a couple hours for a pretrial? We're going to look at all that. So there will be some online. When I talked about the online dispute resolution, when is that more efficient? If you ever go to court and there's 250 people sitting there waiting for their eviction hearing, how can you have like a check-in process? We just started something and we have 97 courts signed up for it, that you can pull up a court calendar and see where there's openings in that court's calendar. That's really efficient when you're an attorney saying, listen, I need a continuance, but I see there's some time next week. So we're hoping to move courts on that. So I think transparency, using technology, using some online dispute resolution, maybe some pretrial preliminary things done remotely, but there's some things constitutionally with the Sixth Amendment right to confront. I mean, you've got to be in the courtroom. So it's been a lot. Thank you for recognizing. It's been a lot of pivoting this year on that.
Further questions or comments? Thank you very much, Judge Rush. Thank you for the work you do. And next is Mr. Graness.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Brown and committee members. Thank you for your time today. We very much appreciate it. My name is Bob Grennis, and I have been on the DOOR team for 4 years, joining back in January of 2017. I served the first 3 years of my tenure as DOOR's Chief Operating Officer, and this year I am very proudly and honored to serve as DOOR's Commissioner. Joining me today to my right is Ed Vance, our Chief Financial Officer, and in the crowd back in the back is Kevin Gully, our Chief Information Officer. He's also our Project Next Door Executive Lead. We look forward to providing you an agency update, a progress report on Project Next Door, and discussing our biennium budget. The DOOR team is currently comprised of 669 hardworking Hoosiers who perform the complex tax administration for Indiana's 65 tax types. That number is actually down 32 since the beginning of the year. Located in 13 locations across the great state of Indiana, this team skillfully processes over $20 billion of Indiana tax revenues, millions of returns and payments, hundreds of thousands of service transactions. They also complete thousands of audits. The DOOR team also provides all the legal, policy, finance, IT, and operational support services required to meet the agency's responsibilities. And as articulated in our mission, DOOR is a service agency, a responsibility that we take very seriously and we care very deeply about, which is evident by this amazing team's accomplishments during this unprecedented year. I'd like to just highlight a few things that have gone on in this interesting year of 2020. In March, when all of our worlds were turned upside down, we were right in the middle of the 2020 individual tax season. We were also in the middle of rollout 2 of Project Next Door. As the agency that processes all of Indiana's tax revenues, we knew we had to do whatever it took to continue serving Indiana, our fellow state employees, and all the Hoosiers that needed us now more than ever. And in true DOOR fashion, the DOOR team went to work to find a way, with a find-a-way spirit, to tackle every challenge that 2020 presented to us. Here are a few highlights. While some other state revenue agencies and the IRS had to shut down some of their operations because of COVID, we never stopped serving Hoosiers and finding a way to keep all of our systems and services operating at very high levels. We accurately implemented all the COVID-related filing, payment, and tax processing adjustments, modified our operations to continue operating safely, and completed the very successful 2020 individual tax season. We processed close to 3.5 million tax returns. We also issued over 2.2 million refunds. Our industry-leading ID protection and refund fraud prevention program stopped $28 million of attempted refund fraud this year, and we've identified over 1,000 Hoosier IDs that have been stolen. Project Next Door never missed a beat, meeting all its development, testing, training, data conversion, customer preparation, and implementation deadlines. Rollout 2 was successfully implemented this past Labor Day weekend. It was on time and on budget. We also met all the budget requirements issued by the state budget agency, including all of the required cuts. We tripled our fiscal year 20 reversion from 2% to 6%. We also developed strategic plans to cut our FY21 and biennium budgets by 15%. And to give us all something to smile about in this challenging year, we were honored this year to be recognized by our industry association, the Federation of Tax Administrators, with 2 FTA Innovation Awards, one for our Taxpayer Information Protection Program and the other for our Employee and Communication. And we were also thrilled this past June for the 2nd consecutive year to be the only Indiana state agency to receive the Top Workplace Award from the Indy Star and Energage, the second consecutive year we were recognized for that award. Now let's talk about Project Next Door. This is a timeline that lays out the entire project. This is our 5-year project where we are modernizing Door's aging technology and all of our system operations and service delivery processes. A little history. In partnership with Deloitte Consulting, the project study and roadmap were completed in 2016. And with the support of Governor Holcomb and the General Assembly, the project funding was also secured in 2016. In 2017, via formal RFI and RFP processes, Fast Enterprises, the industry's leader in revenue processing systems, was selected to be Indiana's Department of Revenue modernization partner. The project was actually initiated in 2018 with the development of the project team, development of the plan, implementation of the technology infrastructure, and the kickoff of what we call Rollout 1. Rollout 1 included the implementation of the system's base functionality, our new e-services customer portal called InTime, and the processing of all Indiana's corporate taxes. It was successfully implemented over Labor Day weekend in 2019. And a reoccurring theme, it was on time and on budget. The agency then pivoted to Rollout 2 that included all the functionality for Indiana's trust taxes, for example, sales, withholding, food and beverage, and county and capers. The 13 Rollout 2 taxes comprise over half of all of Indiana's annual tax revenues. Greater than $20 billion, we're getting close to $14 billion in all of those tax types. And in spite of all the challenges that 2020 presented, Rollout 2 was successfully implemented over Labor Day weekend this last in 2020, and it was on time and on budget. We are now full steam ahead in Rollout 3, which includes all the functionality for Indiana's individual taxes, the ID protection and fraud prevention programs. It also includes 11 additional gaming and wagering taxes. And as of today, it's in great shape. We are scheduled to implement Rollout 3 this coming Labor Day weekend. The final rollout, which is Rollout 4, will include the functionality for all the remaining tax types that we refer to as our special taxes. Examples include cigarette, other tobacco products, alcohol, aviation, and fireworks. Rollout 4 implementation will complete the project, and it'll be finished in mid to late 2022. That is the time that the project will move into system maintenance and support mode. The benefits of the projects are significant, and they're being realized by all stakeholders, customers, Door team members, and partner agencies. We've included a one-page benefit sheet with your handouts that highlight those changes. Now, before I turn it over to Ed to talk specifically about the biennium budget, I would like to share 3 significant biennium challenges that are on our radar. First, running this very complex agency is always a challenge. Doing it with 15% less funding, the majority of which impacts our service operations staffing levels, is a very heavy lift. Finding ways to continue to provide accurate and quality services and high levels of customer service to Hoosiers across the state with significantly less organizational capability is going to be a major challenge. Second, while we are very proud of the tremendous success of Project Next Door, we are not finished. We have a lot of hard work and complex items to take care of. It will take the very best of our entire team over the next 2 years to keep this transformational project on track and bring it home. And finally, we took significant steps to prepare the Door organization for the modernization journey, and it has really paid off. During the biennium period, we will be equally challenged and have to be creative to prepare the organization for the post-Next Door world and to ensure long-term success. And let me close my remarks by saying that we are extremely proud of the service that the Door team provides to Indiana and the Hoosiers that count on us. We care deeply about who we are, what we do, and the role we play along with you and the entire state of Indiana team in serving Indiana and providing great government service at a great value to our fellow Hoosiers. And as we get ready to close 2020 and roll into 2021, With your support, we are confident in our team's ability to successfully tackle all the challenges in front of us and continue to help write Indiana's success story. So let me now turn it over to Ed Vance, DOOR's CFO.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to begin with a overview of our budget request. And at the top, you'll see we have our operating, well, you won't see that. There we go. At the top, you'll see that we have our operating funds listed. And towards the bottom, you'll see that we have our capital project fund listed. And I want to start with just a little bit of background, pick up on some points that the Commissioner was making. Just so starting off with 2020, looking at the operating funds. When the pandemic hit, we dramatically and aggressively reduced our spending. And as a result, Funds 10850 and Fund 32810, we were able to triple our reversion to the state. We went from $1.6 million initially to reverting $5 million. And in addition to that, we also reverted for Fund 10920, our outside collections fund, $1.2 million of our appropriation. And part of that was due to the suspension or pausing of our billing and collection efforts during the initial months of the pandemic. We wanted to do something that would help out Hoosiers during this challenging time, so we did suspend our billing and collections. In spite of doing that, we were still able to collect $328 million in delinquent taxes, and that's just about $2 million under what we were able to collect in the previous year. In FY21, which is, of course, the base year for the biennium, we, as the Commissioner mentioned, submitted our strategic plan and demonstrated how we would meet the 15% reversion requirement. For our agency, that equates to $11.8 million. We are currently on budget and executing well on our strategic plan. However, I should note that our operating cost, 60%, over 60% of our operating cost are labor related. And so a significant portion of our plan assumes attrition, a significant amount of attrition, I might add, and we're going to do our best to manage through that. When you look at the biennium years, FY22 and 23, they are essentially the same as the base year. The one exception is in FY23, where we do have a $4.8 million increase. That is a change package, and we're looking for that to fund an incremental cost of support and maintenance associated with our modernized system. And I've got a slide that talks a little bit about that a little bit later in the presentation. If I could go down to the capital fund line for project next door, we've got some historical spend that you can see on the project there. And then in FY22, that is our final appropriation to complete the project, $20.3 million. As the Commissioner mentioned, we are absolutely on budget and on schedule. The project is performing extremely well, and we're very excited about the prospect of this final appropriation to complete the project. Now just looking at the change package, as I mentioned, we do have an ask for $4.8 million to provide for an incremental cost that's critical to the agency. So when you look at this, this would begin in FY23. Again, the ask is $4.8 million. $4 million of that would be paid to our implementation vendor partner, FAS, for post-implementation support and maintenance. And that would include things like on-site and remote technical support or phone support, installation and testing of security patches and upgrades, database maintenance, defect repairs, and also system configuration for changes that are related to implementation for legislative changes, new and revised, and a whole host of other services that support and maintenance agreement would provide for us. So this schedule shows our funding by fiscal year for this multi-phase project. The total cost of the implementation for internal and external costs is $95 million. That compares favorably with our original budget, which was based on a feasibility study that Deloitte did back in 2017 for $100 million. So we are trending well relative to that initial budget, coming in under $5 million from that original forecast. Our funding and appropriation to date through phase 3 totals $74.7 million. And of that $74.7 million, we have spent 58% of that. So we're beyond that midway point. We've spent 58% of our funding. That equates to about $43 million. Of that $43 million, about 72% of that has gone to pay to our implementation partner, FAST. So that's about $31 million of that. Now looking at our capital requests, this just sort of gives you an idea of some of the details behind our last appropriation to finish up the project. Again, this would be for FY 2022. The appropriation request is for $20.3 million. Our forecast suggests that we're going to spend $21.7 million. So we've got a difference of $1.4 million that will come from carryover that we're forecasting coming out of our current phase 3. And that's just timing of some of the payments. This is a fixed price contract. So we've got milestones that our vendor must meet before we make certain payments. So that 1.4 represents 1.5% of the total implementation project cost of $95 million, so fairly minor. So just looking at some of the details, 25% of the spend will be for personnel that are tied to the project. This is some of our best and brightest. Truly, this is really the secret to our success in this whole implementation that has gone extremely well. 70% of our spend will be for external services. That would primarily be to pay, again, FAST, our implementation vendor partner. About 80% of that $15.1 million will go to them in this final phase. We also have some final payments for IV&V that will pay to Grant Thornton. And then also for system audit services, we have some final payments that will pay to Bronner CPA, the Bronner CPA firm. And then we've got 1% of the spend that will go to a number of things, supplies, capital, admin, and operating. But essentially the big driver there is database servers and software licenses, and then just potentially a small amount of travel to finish up the project. And then lastly, 4% will go to IoT for just their support, their final support to finish up the implementation phase of the project. So that concludes our presentation, and we'd certainly be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Senator Brown.
Chairman, so with respect to this change package, was this $4 million for their ongoing contractual services by FAST? Was this anticipated?
When we originally signed the contract, we did have what we call level 1 support and maintenance. So at the time, our initial contract with FAST was $77.7 million. $17.5 million of that was for 10 years of support and maintenance. So they have these 3 tranches of support. We opted for the lowest level so that we could get into the project and start to understand the methodology and the complexity of the system, and then ultimately make a decision on what level of support and maintenance we would need going forward. And so as we've gotten experience through the implementation process, we've come to the understanding that we can't just do this with level one support. This is an extremely complex, robust enterprise system, and so we absolutely need some on-site support, and that's what this change package will help to cover, this incremental cost of support and maintenance.
Okay, so you have anticipated, and it might not be per year, but originally in your contract, $1.7 million, $17 million over 10 years.
That's correct.
So now, is this $4 million on top of the $1.7 million?
It's includes the 1.7.
It's not on top. It includes the 1.7.
So it really shouldn't say 4 million. It should say 2.3. 17 million, the one.
Well, apologize. When we originally presented this, we knew that we would need additional funding for the support and maintenance part of it. We knew that that would likely be an incremental expense that at the appropriate time we would try to address during the budget process. So, you know, the support and maintenance as a whole is all incremental.
Okay, I guess my concern is that you had probably a variety of factors that you used to select this vendor who's done a good job to begin with, and you anticipated, rightly or wrongly, that you could have the lowest support, which was going to be roughly 1.7 over 10 years. That may not actually work out that amount per every year. I get that. But now we have a jump, which is significant. And is this a one-time? I assume going forward, this higher level of support is something you're anticipating forever, the length of this contract. Is that correct?
That's correct. This would go forward. You know, again, just given the scale and complexity of this system, it is a commercial off-the-shelf system, but it's highly configured for the 65-plus tax types that we administer. And, you know, again, just going through the first 2 years of this implementation, we truly understand the value of our vendor partner and the role that they're going to need to play in keeping us up to date. We don't want to get into a situation where we're versions behind and we're not keeping up with the technology as it continues to progress and move. We want to keep it current so that we can realize the true benefit from the system.
No, but you can understand my concern when the support that we're now going to commit to for the length of this contract has almost tripled per year. It wasn't contemplated in the original contract. And on top of that, so my next question is why are we paying, because I had that question for the auditor, why are we now paying IoT $800,000? And is that every year going on? That
is every year for them to support the system.
And when you put this contract out, did you contemplate that in the 1.7? I'm going to guess no.
No, because that's the internal support piece. So, you know, that's going to happen regardless of the external support and maintenance at the system.
So now we're almost triple what we thought our support would need to be from what we had anticipated when the contract.
Right, and what we tried to share when we initially brought this in front of the Budget Committee was that, you know, we don't fully understand exactly what we may need. You know, we sort of knew that some of the other states out there were going beyond a level one support. But we wanted to go through our process and make that assessment. So we said, you know, initially what we wanted to accomplish during the contract negotiation phase was to at least lock up what we felt was a long-term commitment to a reasonably priced level one tranche. I think we successfully accomplished that. Now we're looking at an amendment to get that additional support that we think we'll need to be able to manage the system successfully into the future based on what we know today. But that's what we tried to share when we initially brought this in front of the committee is, you know, we don't know, but we're going to start with this level one support and then we'll see from there.
No, I appreciate that, and I'm not faulting you. I just am a little bit concerned that, to be quite frank, that maybe you, because of the abilities of our own IAT, because of the abilities of DOR, and or perhaps because of the abilities they sold you on, we thought we could do it with the level one. I certainly don't want us to not support a system we will spend almost $100 million of implementing. We don't want to have the auditor situation where it's a DOS program essentially in 20, but that's a little disconcerting. Okay, my last question has to do with the fact that you identified almost 1,000 Hoosier IDs that had been stolen, which was unfortunate, but great that you identified that. So what, with that information, I assume you notified the Hoosiers themselves, but did you go across agencies? We had a discussion last budget hearing with respect to DWD and identity stolen, and if someone applied for unemployment, for example, in their name. So did you share that, and are you allowed to share that information with other agencies so they know too, Susie Smith's ID has been stolen, therefore, you know, if they are trying to access other benefits, make them aware of that information?
So we work with the individual Hoosier and let them know that we have received a tax return requesting a refund in their name and social security number, and they didn't do it. We inform them that that has occurred, and we provide them all the information and resources that they need to address it. We don't share that information with other agencies.
Are you allowed to?
I don't know.
Could you find that out, please?
Absolutely. And Senator Brown, those were great questions about the funding, and if I can share a little more. So 4 years ago, we were just embarking on this enormous project. And we were hearing from other fast enterprise states that what you were going to have to do was you were going to have to buy what they call level 3 support from fast enterprises forever for them to maintain this very sophisticated system. And level 3 support is very expensive, much more expensive than what we are showing you here. At that time, we didn't know. And we had the confidence that we could figure it out along the way. We would let their support infrastructure mature. We also wanted to figure out what capabilities we could build internally. Because what FAST calls level 3 support is you are hiring them 100% to maintain your system. They also make all of your system changes for additional tax types or regulations, or you really are outsourcing the complete maintenance of what we call our Indiana tax system with FAST, and we did not want to sign up for that. We also had the confidence that we had the organizational capability to take some of that on ourselves. So we didn't make a decision 4 years ago, and we've learned a lot. The industry's learned a lot. Most FAST states are not doing level 3. They are doing what we are proposing to do, and it's called the hybrid model, which you buy all of the upgrades, the version upgrades, the security patches, all of those items. You actually secure that from FAST, which you need to. It's their system. You also contract with them to have them help you do some of the things we need to do to maintain Indiana's tax system. But we couple it with our IT team, which we have internally, that has Indiana tax experience. So during this time, we've developed a plan that is, number one, it's flexible, because the $4 million that we believe, not the IoT charge, the $4 million we believe in fiscal year 23, that's just the first year after we go live. But we can make a year-to-year decision on what we think we need from FAST. And we actually believe today, although I think we've all learned in 2020, let's not try to predict the future, we believe that number will go down. We think our capability will go up, and our need to use FAST will go down. We will always need them. We also have to get their patches and their version upgrades. We think we can build that capability. And let me also then say, we had the confidence that we could figure out efficiencies that we could fund that without asking for additional money. COVID took that away. We were experiencing and planning for efficiencies where we were going to be able to self-fund this hybrid model within our appropriation. We gave 15% back of that in the with the COVID budget cuts. So we no longer have those funds to be able to pay for this hybrid model. So two things. One is we don't think today that it's 4.8 million forever, but we don't know. We don't think it's any more than that. We actually believe it's going to be less than that. And hopefully, when we get to FY23, things will look very different for all of us, including with tax revenues and funding, and we'll be able to make a much better decision for FY24 and 25 and 26. You're welcome.
Thank you. Any further, Representative Porter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One quick question. Has DOR realized any additional revenue if you had not put this system in place? Did that generate you more revenue than you if you had not done it?
So the system itself would not generate more revenue, no.
Would it help you? Go ahead.
I'm sorry. What it will be able to do, because the system has significantly more data captured and more analytical ability, we are going to be able to drive additional compliance. Our audit selection activities will be much more sophisticated. We're already realizing that. Our audit selection analytics, we're using new data that is in the system that has never been in the system before. So we do believe that our enhanced analytics, our enhanced audit selection, compliance, we are going to be developing new collection scoring models so that we can more intelligently, dynamically allocate our resources to the most lucrative areas of non-compliance. We do believe the enhanced data and the enhanced sophistication and our enhanced capability to use the system will ultimately drive more revenues, if that helps.
Yeah, that was the original question before you went through, before you pontificated on another way. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions or comments? Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. Mr. Fred Payne, as soon as they'll clean off the podium and then it's your turn. Thank you.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to share our budget with you here today. A few things that we thought that would be beneficial is to share with the committee kind of an update on where we are from an economic standpoint, general update on really what the agency is here to provide our citizens of Indiana. So we'll go forward with that. So this is the agenda that we'll cover today. First, our economic overview. As you may recall, when we came into 2020, we were experiencing one of the lowest unemployment rates that we've experienced in Indiana history. We were at 3.1%. As you all recall, things started to change in March. We started to experience quite a few things that were different. Our unemployment rate skyrocketed to 16.9% in April, and it was actually further adjusted by the DOL upwards of 17%. But since that time, the unemployment rate has steadily declined. We've stair-stepped it down all the way to 5%, which is where it rests today. Now, as mentioned, we're at a 5% unemployment rate. The last time we were at 5% was in April of 2015. At this point, that 5% represents about the second lowest unemployment rate in the Midwest, save for Minnesota. Our labor force over time, since the pandemic has started, has been reduced by about 48,000 Hoosiers. Currently have approximately 3.3 million Hoosiers who are in the labor market. Our labor force participation rate has changed. There's been a reduction a little bit over 1%. But still, compared to the national rate, that rate is still a little bit higher. As you all know, our largest industries are in the trade, manufacturing, transportation, and utilities. We have about 120,000 job postings. Even though we're experiencing record high unemployment, we do have employers around the state who are looking for skilled and qualified individuals to fill jobs. The last time we checked, we're about at 122,000 job postings. So now I'll talk a little bit about really the structure of the agency and how we're set up and how we provide employment and reemployment services to Hoosiers throughout the state. We do this under three specific pillars. One is workforce operations, the other is unemployment insurance, the third is the Office of Work-Based Learning and Apprenticeship. On the workforce operations side, that side of that pillar is funded through state and federal dollars. On the unemployment insurance side, that program is funded primarily through federal dollars, and our Office of Work-Based Learning and Apprenticeship through state dollars. So we'll talk about each one of those individually. So first, when it comes to workforce operations, this pillar, it contains programs that are both federally and state funded. And just a few examples of some of those state-funded programs. We have our Next Level Jobs program, and this program has resulted in about a little bit over 2,000 employers being engaged in our program and providing training to over 30,000 Hoosiers since its inception. There's been an annual wage gain for participants in those programs to the tune of about $5,800. Then we also have our adult education program. And since its inception, we've served over 89,000 Hoosiers, connecting them to secondary, post-secondary credentials, secondary and post-secondary credentials. One of the things that we are striving for in the state is to increase the post-secondary attainment of individuals in Indiana from somewhere in the mid 42% up to 60% in the next few years. So if we look at the number of high school equivalencies awarded, Indiana is ranked. We still have a lot of work to do. But we have some significant gains in measurable skills and in our high school equivalency program. We have our Jobs for America's Graduates program. Essentially, this program is targeted at individuals who are on the verge of dropping out of high school. And so we're in the network with about 130 programs around the country, in our state. This program has been pretty successful over the past few years. It boasts a 96% graduation rate, 91% with military career or post-secondary plans once they graduate from high school. And our last year numbers for 2019, 2020, more than the individuals who participated in the program, they received somewhere upwards of $16 million in scholarships for them to continue on with their education or training. Then we have our reemployment services. These reemployment services provide jobs for Hoosiers. They provide introduction to our Work One centers and key workshops designed to get them to a position where they can either apply or they can participate in certain job skills and have some in-person training. Next, we'll talk about our Office of Work-Based Learning and Apprenticeship. The specific goal of this office is to increase the number of work-based learning and apprenticeship students or participants throughout the state. This program was created, or this office was created back in 2018 by executive order. And specifically in that first year, during, I think, the governor's State of the State address, he had given us a challenge to increase the number of Hoosiers who are engaged in work-based learning and apprenticeship programs by doubling it from 12,500 to 25,000 by December of 2019. And as of December 2019, that year, there were over 35,000 participants. So there was a huge increase, over 193% increase in work-based learning and apprenticeship participation. Since that program has started, since that office has started, we created something called the State Earn and Learn program, which essentially is an alternative to apprenticeship. It is a program designed or worked on with and by employers and educational institutions to provide specific training for individuals. And we have had over 100 of those State Earn and Learn programs throughout the state. So together there are more than about 1,200 programs throughout the state for youth and adults. That's inclusive of apprenticeship and work-based learning programs. So the office has boasted national rankings within its short time here. So there's been a lot of work done with this office in a short period of time. Part of the office, what it does is it does reach out and receive grants from the U.S. Department of Labor. It did receive over $3 million from the U.S. Department of Labor for expansion grants and for expansion programs. And it has funded nearly 5,000 programs. And the participants in the programs, the demographic makeup, are here on the slide, so you can see the demographic makeup of the participants in those programs. And it's also allowed us to strengthen our partnerships with workforce development boards across the state. And we have a State Earn and Learn program in each one of the key economic sectors in the state, with advanced manufacturing, health and life sciences, and building and construction, business services, and IT, and transportation and logistics. So this office has allowed us or helped us to build a stronger education and union and community partnerships, as we know that when we're talking about workforce development, one entity doesn't do it alone. It is a partnership between state, the community, as well as educational institutions and businesses. And the third pillar of the DWD is our unemployment insurance program, which is funded with federal dollars. So we'll talk a little bit about what's happened with unemployment since January. In January, we had about 28,000 unemployment insurance claims paid. Since January, we've paid over 700, close to 750,000 claims. That's about a little bit over 2,600% increase since January. So we did see that extreme spike, as you all are well aware. And the total benefits that have been paid are close to $6.1 billion, with about a little bit over close to $5 billion in federal dollars and about $1.3 billion in state dollars. So when we came into this pandemic, our plan and our strategy were simple but sometimes they can be difficult and complicated to carry out. The plan was simple. We wanted to make sure that we stayed within our goal of paying 80% of the claim, 85% of the claims within 21 days, and so we had to also implement new federal programs. Our strategy was to increase and magnify the use of targeted automation, technology, and people. So just as an example of how this has grown and moved over time, just looking back earlier this year, we had about, maybe 19,000 claims paid in a month's time. Then we skyrocketed up in May and peaked to about 346,000 claims being paid in a 1-week time period. That has ratcheted down a little bit, and we're averaging somewhere about 169,000 claims being paid per week. So just to show you some of the changes that were made throughout that time, pre-COVID, we had about 436 staff. As of November 1, it's about 1,128. Our contact center, if you look at pre-COVID numbers, they were receiving somewhere about 8,600 calls per week, say in the first week of March. But then if you look over a greater time period, from March to April, we really looked at about fielding somewhere about 200 and 250,000 calls per week. We've gotten our wait time down to about 3 minutes and 39 seconds on average in October. So from a benefit standpoint, as I mentioned earlier, back in early March and before March, we're averaging about, low 20s in the average of claims paid per week. We did skyrocket to about 346,000 claims in a week in May, and so we're averaging about 170,000 per week in October. So just a few COVID-related changes over to the right. Those were more of the operational changes. The other ones over on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, we have the federal programs and the implementation. We had a variety of federal programs that we had to implement, which provided greater resources to individuals. We do have one of those programs. The federal programs will expire at the end of this month unless there's some federal congressional action, but we've successfully implemented and put into place some of those programs. One of the things that we've dealt with here, actually since the beginning, but it has ratcheted up quite a bit over the past few months, is fraud. We have been dealing with an extreme amount of fraud in our unemployment insurance system, actually across the nation. We've implemented a variety of new data analytic fraud tools that have helped us. We've tried to make sure that we are on top of it, but the fraud types change day after day. So we have to make sure that our system is continuing to address that. Some examples of fraudulent activity will include identity theft, individuals continuing to collect unemployment when they go back to work. We have account takeovers. Practically, you name it, we are seeing it when it comes to fraud on the UI side. Some of the states here are listed that have some of the heaviest fraud activity. Indiana is not exempt from that. We saw a real big increase in fraud activity in July of this year. And at that time, we changed some of our processes. We began what we call locking down claims. So when an individual will file a claim that presented itself as a fraudulent claim, we will lock that down. Essentially what we meant is that we would hold that claim, not pay out anything until the person is able to identify his or her identity, or to verify his or her identity. And we added some different identification checks on the back end of that. So we continue to address fraud on a daily basis. So when it comes to unemployment insurance, as you know, that those claims are paid out of our unemployment insurance trust fund. And when you go back and look at this chart all the way back from 2005, you see where the unemployment insurance trust fund was upwards of $400 million. And then when we hit the Great Recession with the financial crisis, we ended up having to borrow close to $2.1 billion. And then we put a few things in place, and we started adding more to that fund. And so our trust fund balance consistently increased since 2011. And earlier this year, we had the highest balance of the trust fund earlier this year. But we are now in a borrowing phase on our trust fund. As of November 23rd, we borrowed somewhere close to $85 million. That number has grown to close to about $100 million now. And so the interest on that is waived for 2020. But there are some things that we have to look at when it comes to borrowing on the unemployment insurance side of the house. So now, specifically as it comes to our budget request, here's our yearly budget request that ranges, that looks at all of our state appropriations and the state programs. Most of these are in the area of workforce operations. On our Next Level Jobs program and our employer training grant program, the request is $16 million. In our adult ed area, 12. And our JAG, as I mentioned earlier, that boasts a 96% graduation rate, we're requesting $6.8 million. And our Workforce Ready Grant 3 and our Office of Work-Based Learning and Apprenticeship, another $510,000. And a mixture of DWD, other programs, about $2 million. So that totals about $42 million per year for 2022 and 2023. So as we look forward to what's in our future at the DWD, we know that we're in a COVID environment. We know that we're not, hopefully we won't be in COVID forever. So we want to make sure that we're preparing ourselves for when we get out of COVID, and we're looking forward. So our theme that we're rallying around really is continue to serve our Hoosiers through COVID-19 while accelerating our forward recovery. And so when we think about workforce and when we think about unemployment, we're trying to make sure that we're looking forward while also taking the lessons and getting informed about what's happened over the past 8 months. So any questions?
Questions? Representative Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Payne, for the presentation, and thank you for your work and your service this year. I imagine you never expected this in your professional career. A couple of questions. First, I was reading over the weekend that some states have overpaid and are now clawing back money from folks who've applied for benefits. Is that true in Indiana?
Sure. Overpayments it's not a new phenomenon. Overpayments are pretty common. They've been around since we've had our unemployment system. So to answer your question, yes, there are some overpayments, and we have to pull back some of those payments.
You have to pull them back. Okay. So do you have any sense of how many there are?
Off the top of my head, no.
Okay. Because it has been a concern in some areas where folks who didn't realize they were being overpaid still are unemployed, are out of benefits, and they're like wage garnishment is happening. Do you use wage garnishment as a tool?
What we try to do, is we notify the individuals that there is an overpayment, and then we go through a variety of things to make sure we're addressing that. Now, what's really key about overpayments and the things that we're able to do, keep in mind that a lot of the rules are federal rules that we have to follow. And so some of the pulling back and the overpayment pieces are things that, some things we can waive, some things we can't. And the things that we cannot waive, that is what we end up addressing with the claimant. Okay.
Well, I hope that we're waiving as much as we can, or at least, easing the pain so folks aren't losing homes, being able to feed their kids, et cetera, because of that mistake. It's the state's fault, not theirs. So I hope we're being as kind as we can to Hoosiers who are struggling so hard right now. And then there was an email from your department that mentioned that when the two programs that expire, PUA and the PEUC, that after December 26th, even if people still have eligibility, there will be no more money left. They will receive zero additional funds. So here's this question. If someone applied and it took longer, maybe something was not clear in their application, and so they still have money that they're eligible for that they didn't receive earlier when they had first applied, would that money go away too?
No, if, if the individual is eligible now and they've applied and, you know, we're still working to resolve their claim, they still are owed that money. They will be paid whatever they were eligible for.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. And then one final question. The Navient contract, can you explain what value they're adding? I mean, I understand they're answering phone calls for people, but they're not actually able to help expedite. And I know we've spent at least $15 million, but I think more than that on this contract.
Okay, so good question. So the Navient contract, if you recall, when we first came into this pandemic, I think one of the slides that I showed, we were fielding somewhere about a few thousand calls a week. But when this pandemic hit, we shot up to hundreds of thousands a week. Our call center could not handle that volume. Navient, we brought in Navient as essentially our contracted call center. They were contracted to answer questions related to people's claims. And they were not all hired to be adjudicators. Adjudicators are the people who are in our system who actually go through and they resolve claims. They address the issues that are on the claims. So when it comes to the value add from Navient, we talk about going from call wait times to upwards of 2 hours to call wait times down to about 3 minutes. So the value add in part was that. Now, all of those individuals who work on Navient, not all of them are purely, answering phones. That's a big part of them. But we have utilized Navient for a variety of other things. Some include adjudication.
Okay, thank you. I guess if we're spending millions for people to not help people, it seems like it's a concern and something that should be scrutinized a little more, but.
Well, I wouldn't say that we're spending millions for people not to help people, because every person that has been hired by Navient to answer a phone, even if it was just to answer the most routine, they provided some assistance to that person who called. Sometimes some of those calls, some of the claims, they do require a higher level of engagement than that particular person who answered the call can provide. So then they're moved on to someone else who's able to provide.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Senator Brown?
Chairman, again, I echo Representative Hamilton's. It's been all the agencies, this has been heavy lift for you, but are the additional 700 staff increases, so those are DWD staffers?
It's a combination. So we've had transitional staff, people from different agencies to help. We've had people move within the DWD over, and we've had contract help. So that combination that I have here listed in here is a combination between contract and state employees.
So it could be a Navient person?
Yes.
Oh, okay, so they're not all permanent. All right, I mean, I share the same concerns. I appreciate, I'm sure initially somebody just wanted to talk to someone, but to be honest, if they can't answer the question, getting a live person on the phone after 3.5 minutes isn't any real hours if they're not able to then go on to someone who can. Last time we had a budget hearing, I had asked about the fraud, and I still have concerns about the identity theft. Do you have a number of how many fraudulent cases or individuals or asks that there were requests, and how much has been paid out to date?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but it continues to change every week. I'll give you sort of an example of why it's hard to capture that number. We had over, let's say, a time period in mid-November with over a 3 day period. We ended up having something about close to 10 million attempts, fraudulent attempts at our system. That represented about 92% of the activity at that time. So it changes on a daily basis, the number of attempts. Now, because we have to verify some of those attempts, we lock those claims down. And then if it isn't fraudulent, the person comes in and verifies who they are. And that would be, you know, a legitimate claim. So we're still trying to calculate just how many attempts that we ended up thwarting, and then what dollar amount that could have been if we had paid out. So to directly answer your question, I don't have that number.
Okay, so that piece I get, and we didn't pay it out, so we can say it's tens of millions or billions, and we saved it, so good, but we didn't have to pay it at all. So I'm kind of guessing then, anything that we've paid out fraudulently, it's going to be pretty hard with the vast volume of claims made for us to really get a hard number on how much we paid fraudulently. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you're not going to be able to give me that number?
Not today. No, I can't give you that.
Do you have a sense of at all how many dollar in a six-figure, eight-figure amount we're looking at?
I don't want to guess, but I don't want to guess that number.
I mean, obviously, a significant portion are federal dollars,
Right,
which are still our dollars, but it's still, okay, so the other question from the last hearing was about the identity theft individual themselves. You heard me maybe talking to the Department of Revenue. So the concern is I am now a victim of an identity hack, and so the DOR will let me know that. We had this question the last time. The reverse is you lock my account down, and the last month we heard is I have to figure that out and resolve it, and you don't open my account until I have figured that out. So is that the case? And do you share, or like do you share this information so other agencies can react to this? If I'm a bad actor, my account should be locked down everywhere. If I'm not and I'm at fault, do you sort of share this information as I go through and unlock my account?
Okay. I think I understand the substance of your question. I'll try to answer it this way. So in locking down the account, what we do there are two sides to it. There's the side that the claimant, that we provide the claimant with information that they have to follow up on, and then there's a part of sort of the law enforcement side and our side. On the claimant side, what we do is we'll end up locking down that person's account. That's what we do on our side. But then we also provide them with about 4 or 5 things that they should do to ensure that they're protecting their identity across the board. Register with the FTC and state police report, all of those things. So that's a person's, an individual's responsibility. On our end, when we lock the claim down, what we'll do in our system is we put identifiers in place that if something comes up that, you know, no claim can be filed for that person. And we provide that information to what we call an Integrity Center hub, which is really with the Office of Inspector General and, you know, one of our federal partners with the National Association of Workers. So that information goes into this large federal database. So it flags that person's information if someone tries to use it again. In terms of sharing it with another sister agency or something like that, we don't have that in place where we're sharing information with another agency. So what we have done, though, is made sure that that individual has taken care of putting flags on their identifiable information so that when someone does try to file something, that it's triggered, you know, on their credit report, or nothing can go through because they have done all the things they need to do from a reporting standpoint.
So again, if my identity is hacked, then it would be nice to know if someone is now trying to file an unemployment claim as well over here trying to get my tax refund, right? And you're not talking to each other. Okay, that's probably a bit of an IT nightmare. I get that, but we should look at that. The other piece, the last time it seemed that your representative at the hearing was suggesting that if I don't do all these things and you, the DWD, have not resolved the claim, I still am locked out, even though you know I am the person to whom the unemployment. So
the person's like, are you saying
so
that the person
once you
can't
identify
file?
someone has tried to file a claim in my name, and now you know it's not me, but I tell you I'm here, I still didn't get my unemployment. How long does it take? Because it had been suggested the last time we had a hearing that it could be months.
Okay, I understand your question now. So yes, that person is still, again, they have benefits that are due and owing to them.
Yes.
So yes, they will get those benefits. I can't tell you the average amount of time because each claim is so unique to itself. So it depends on where in the process that person's claim was. So I can't tell you that it would be 2 days or 5 days, but that person will receive the payment. So if your question was, one, will that person receive payment? The answer to the question is yes, if they're eligible. The answer to your question on when, how long will it take, that is a little bit more abstract because it would depend on a lot of factors within that particular person's claim.
Okay, thank you. Because the last time it was suggested that it almost would have to have been adjudicated before the person who's the victim of identity theft would actually receive their right.
Well, adjudication is going to happen regardless.
But I'm not waiting for that.
If you filed for benefits and your claim is not, if it didn't fit all of the parameters to get sort of an automated adjudication, then yes, it will have to be adjudicated.
But not through the criminal courts. That's the,
No, not through
Okay.
well, no, I didn't hear you say criminal court.
I
So
didn't,
no.
but that's the impression I'd gotten the
No,
last
no,
time.
okay, so I totally misunderstood that question, because I wasn't taking the criminal court side. I'm talking purely through our
Right, the administrative process. I got it.
our system at the DWD.
Okay, great, thank you.
Senator Melton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner, for your testimony today. A couple of quick questions. When it comes down to adult education, I know in previous economic downturns, you would see an uptick of folks in re-enrolling back into school and to other credentials. I think based off the numbers, I see a trend of that happening again. Do you foresee there be a need of additional resources from the state to invest more into that?
Well, to answer your question directly, is that you can never invest enough in re-educating people. But we do believe that based upon the budget that we've presented, that based upon the need that we have to fill and how the budget connects in different aspects, we think that we've asked for what we needed.
Okay. And going back to some of the questions that Representative Hamilton asked is, when it comes down to the current backlog, at what point do you feel like the department will get caught up? Where you're comfortable that you feel like the numbers are starting to kind of become more steady?
So, a good question, because as we continue to get claims, of course, you have to address those claims. I'm going to separate these out into two categories of claims. So we get the claims that are kind of our regular unemployment insurance claims. And then we get the federal program with the pandemic unemployment assistance, the PUA side of the house. On the regular unemployment insurance claim side of the house, the system is moving, and we've addressed a lot of fraud there, and we have good methods in place. The federal program is something in and of itself. It's sort of a little different. Because of the nature of that program, we tend to see a higher level of fraud, a higher number of fraud. So to answer your question on that, it's addressing the fraud really has slowed down us addressing those PUA claims. And there are multi-layers that go into a PUA claim that don't exist on the regular unemployment insurance side. So on the regular unemployment insurance side of the house, I think we're moving along at a steady pace. On the PUA side of the house, just to be quite honest with you, because that program is going to end at the end of the year, is scheduled to end, we're now seeing a little bit more fraud in that system because the fraudsters are trying to get the last bit of payments in. So I hate that I can't give you a specific answer on that, other than we're trying to work through it, but we are seeing changes in that program and how people are filing because of a lot of the fraud, and it's changing on a weekly basis, actually daily basis.
Last question, Mr. Chair. When I look at the chart, when the numbers, the April unemployment, I think whatever that percentage was, and it started to decline to October, we're seeing a lot of states going back into shutdowns, and I'm not sure where Indiana's going to be on that list. But if we were to go back into that world in terms of a shutdown. From a funding perspective, you know, what do you envision on how we address it with the timing, with with Congress not possibly passing a stimulus packet, and we still have funding from our previous stimulus package? So how do you think we should address that now in terms of preparation?
One of the things that we're trying to do internally with our system is our team is preparing to wind it down, but also not winding it down to such a degree that if we have to turn it back on pretty quickly, that it would cause more problems. In terms of the funding piece, as you recall, on the UI payments, we're now borrowing from the feds. Mm-hmm. So none of that will necessarily impact how we pay funding. Now, in terms of maybe CARES Act dollars, if some of that money is used to help to provide some support there, what that does is on the long term, it impacts different utilization rates for employers or credits that employers may use, which ultimately results into more money for the community. So at the end of the day, if we continue to draw down, we'll be borrowing a little bit more money. If some of the CARES Act money is used to assist with that, it will be beneficial to employers and individuals. But with that said, none of what happens is going to impact us paying out benefits, because we have our safety measure that's in place now that we've triggered with the borrowing from the federal government that's in.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Peda.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator
Chairman.
Peda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner, for your hard work during these difficult times. What is the strategy for the CARE Act dollars? I know that we, as a state, we currently have about $700 million. Have you worked with the governor's office and the leaders of both chambers on a strategy to precisely use some of those dollars? And if that dollar figure has been set, are you aware of how much these dollars will be used for to replenish or help with the uninsured employment fund?
Sure. So we're informing the Economic Recovery Committee on just the status of our borrowing and then just some projections over the next year. So we're providing that information to them so that they can make informed decisions based on where we are now and what we project out over the next year or 2 years.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Payne, for your presentation and information. Thank you. Mr. Weesaw, Ms. Tate.
Hi, good afternoon. On behalf of the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi and Governor Holcomb's negotiating team, thank you for providing us this educational forum to ensure that the Assembly has all of the necessary information in the event that an executed tribal state compact is reached. My name is Sarah Tate, and I've been tasked by Governor Holcomb to spearhead negotiations on his behalf. Many of you know me in my capacity as the Executive Director of the Indiana Gaming Commission. I'd like to introduce Chairman Matt Weesaw, who is here today on behalf of the band.
Thank you, Sarah. Mr. Chairman, Senator Mishler, appreciate the opportunity to say a few words here today to the Budget Committee. I just want to give you a few very brief remarks about the Pokagon Band before I turn it over to our General Counsel, Mr. Phelan. The band was reaffirmed in 1994 under congressional legislation and signed into law by President Clinton. We are the only federally recognized Indian tribe currently in Indiana, and we are one of 12 federally recognized tribes in Michigan. We have approximately just a frog's hair over 5,900 tribal citizens, roughly 1,000 that live here in Indiana, and our median age is 24 years old. So as you can see, we are a very young tribe, so much of what we try to do with the revenue generated from our economic development is to encourage our young people to get their education and to be contributors and not clients. That's why this is very important to us. We have roughly 6,700 acres that we currently own, about 1,000 here in Indiana, 1,900 here in Indiana, about 166 acres are in trust. In Michigan, we have 1,500 acres in fee land and 3,200 acres in trust. One of the important things for us, and one of the things I hope you pick up in the relationships that we're continually trying to build here in this state, is we value strongly relationships. Our word is our bond, and I think once you have an opportunity to interact with us, you will pick up on that very quickly. I'm proud to say that we have not been involved in any court action. We work very hard to settle any of our disagreements, and if we're wrong, we admit we're wrong. We're not afraid of that. And I think based on those relationships, when the other party thinks that you know, they may be a little bit off, we get things settled, so that's very important to us. We successfully operate 3 casinos in Michigan, and we have one here in South Bend, as you know, that has been in operation for almost 3 years now. So we are subject to a rigorous gaming operation or a gaming commission that we have as a tribe, but also work closely with the NIGC and the Michigan Gaming Control Board. And in Indiana, I'm sure that we will be doing very much the same thing. We value the relationship that we have built with Ms. Tate and her team, and we look forward to improving on that as we move forward. And with that, I would like to turn the mic and the PowerPoint over to Mike Phelan, our General Counsel.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you. I think it's helpful to provide a little bit of background on tribal-state relations and where we have been. Walk through this a little bit. November 29th, 2016, the Chairman mentioned we have 6 acres taken into trust in the South Bend, city of South Bend. January 16th, 2018, Band opened a commercial gaming facility on that site. That is what is referred to as Class 2 gaming under federal. August 13th, 2019, the Pokagon submitted a request to the Governor Holcomb to commence negotiations for a tribal state compact to authorize Class 3 gaming at that site. September 3rd, 2019, the Governor assembled a negotiating team, commenced negotiations with the band representatives for that tribal state compact. I want to talk briefly about, give you a little bit of background on Indian tribes most folks don't know a lot about. Pardon me. Most folks don't know a lot about the history and the complicated legal history and background of Indian tribes. So Indian tribes under federal law have inherent rights of self-determination that predate European contact. Powers that are lawfully vested in an Indian tribe are not, in general, powers that are delegated by acts of Congress, but rather inherent powers of a limited sovereignty which have never been extinguished. The Indian Commerce Clause in the U.S. Constitution is understood as giving the federal government exclusive authority over Indian tribes. And based partly on principles of international law, the federal government is understood as also having a trust responsibility to those Indian tribes. Indian tribes still possess those aspects of sovereignty not withdrawn by treaty or statute or by implication as a necessary result of their status. And the U.S. Constitution does not address the relationship between tribes and the states where they reside and occupy lands. Jurisdiction over tribal gaming under federal law. In efforts to address increasing budget shortfalls, some states were led to authorize state lotteries as a new source of revenue. Similarly, Indian tribes who faced severe budget challenges due to limitations on their taxing authority turned to gaming under tribal regulation as a new source of revenue. Challenges involving that effort made their way to the U.S. Supreme Court in 1987 in the case of California versus Cabazon Band of Mission Indians that determined that Indian tribes have a right to conduct gaming within their jurisdictions under tribal rather than state regulation, except where state law criminally prohibits such gaming. As a result of that Cabazon case, efforts that had already been underway in Congress to develop federal law to establish some regulatory framework for Indian gaming gained momentum, and they ended up producing the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. I'll refer to that as IGRA for short. IGRA was the result of a carefully brokered compromise between tribal and state interests. It established a comprehensive federal regulatory framework for tribal gaming within Indian country that preempts state regulation. It is unusual among federal Indian laws in that it seeks to balance the sovereign rights and interests of Indian tribes and states. And it provides a specific role for states by requiring a tribal state compact in order for a tribe to engage in Class III gaming. A Class III gaming compact under IGRA is an agreement negotiated at arm's length between a tribal government and a state government. It is limited to Class III gaming, which is generally slot machines and table games under the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. It is required in order for a tribe to engage in Class III gaming, and it authorizes a tribe to conduct the same types of Class III games that are authorized under the laws of the state. It is subject to federal approval for compliance with IGRA and other applicable federal law. And I'll turn it over to Sarah at this point.
Thank you. So Indiana law vests the duty to negotiate a tribal state compact with the governor. As Mike said, Governor Holcomb assembled a negotiating team, and since early September, the governors and the Pokagon band's negotiating teams have been engaged in substantive negotiations in an effort to conclude a compact. Negotiations are in a very late stage, but there is not currently an executed compact. Because of that, we are not in a position here today to discuss specific terms that are still being negotiated, as we do not want to undermine the process. Our goal here today is to make sure you all have background information, and if a compact is reached, it will undergo the public legislative process, and we will be in a position to address the compact terms at that time. So Indiana Code 429 governs that process. In 2015, Indiana Code 429 was passed. It prescribes the procedures for ratification of an executed tribal state compact. To ratify the compact, the General Assembly must enact a bill codifying the compact in a manner required for legislation under the state constitution. The statute specifically provides that a compact must include or address 5 certain items. First, the management of the Indian tribe's gaming operation. Second, revenue sharing with the state and local units of government. Infrastructure and site improvements, the administration and regulation of gaming, and the types of games operated by the Indian tribe. There are other terms that may be negotiated or agreed to between the parties. So if an act ratifying the compact is passed, state law provides that it is submitted to both the Indiana Secretary of State and the United States Secretary of the Interior. The Interior then has three options. They can approve the compact, they can reject the compact, or they can take no action, and within 45 days, the compact would become deemed approved. And then in the future, if there are any amendments to a ratified compact, that would also go through the exact same process of ratification by the General Assembly. So next, we will go on to required and prohibited compact terms under IGRA. So in addition to the state law, IGRA also specifies that there are permissible subjects that can be addressed in a compact. So those are application of state criminal and civil laws, the determination of regulation and jurisdiction between the tribe and state, assessment of state regulatory costs, remedies for breach of contract, tribal taxes comparable to state taxes, operation and maintenance standards, including licensing, and any other subject directly related to the operation of gaming activities. Federal law explicitly states that a state may not impose a tax, fee, charge, or other assessment. In addition, it has been found that compacts may not contain any subjects that are not related to gaming. Revenue sharing is allowable if a tribe receives a valuable economic benefit from state concessions on a topic that is not required for the state to negotiate. This is almost always some form of market exclusivity. And I know Mike's gonna get into this in more detail, but there are no hard and fast range of permissible levels of revenue sharing, but it must bear some relation to the value of benefit conferred by the state. So, Mike.
Thank you. So in order to avoid IGRA's express prohibition against taxation of tribal gaming, a federal court decision out of the Ninth Circuit involving the Rincon Band of Mission Indians, the court in that case explained that a state may request revenue sharing if the revenue sharing provision is for uses directly related to the operation of gaming activities, consistent with the purposes of IGRA, and not imposed because it is a bargain for exchange for a meaningful concession. The Rincon court added, quoting from a letter from the Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs, "It is the position of the department to permit revenue sharing payments in exchange for quantifiable economic benefits over which the state is not required to negotiate under IGRA, such as substantial exclusive rights to engage in Class 3 gaming activities. We have not, nor are we disposed to authorize revenue sharing payments in exchange for compact terms that are routinely negotiated by the parties as part of the regulation of gaming activities, such as duration, number of gaming devices, hour of operation, and wage limits." And I think that is the end of our PowerPoint presentation. I'd be happy to take questions if anyone has any.
Questions? Senator Brown.
Thank you. So I guess you are really just reporting to us that you have not reached an agreement between the
I think we view this as an opportunity to provide some important background on this, this agreement, that the state has never seen this type of agreement before, and again, a little bit of an opportunity to introduce the Pokagon Band and tribal sovereignty to this group. I would say this, that we are confident we're going to conclude that compact probably within the next few weeks.
So you didn't need a compact when you instituted Class 2 gaming?
That's correct.
You do with Class 3, which
That's
includes
correct.
slot machines and sports betting?
That's correct. So the operation that is in place now is Class 2 gaming. It is essentially an electronic form of a bingo game, but they do look like slot machines. They just are not treated legally or for regulatory purposes as slot machines.
And so, and I don't know the answer to this, band have to pay the fees that other casinos in the state of Indiana had to pay when they opened up the license?
No, and again, as mentioned in our presentation, federal law preempts state regulation of Indian gaming, so we're not subject to that requirement that applies to Indiana state licensed casinos.
I didn't think so. So in Michigan, where you have Class 3 gaming and you pay 8% to the state, that was a negotiated,
That's correct, yes.
and so are you doing sports betting there as well?
We are doing sports betting on our tribal lands, and we will soon be doing it under state law and under state regulation throughout the state, as the state licensed casinos are also going through that process. That is expected to happen in January.
In Michigan?
In Michigan.
So we would assume then you would also be asking to do virtual sports betting across the state of Indiana, Class 3 license?
We would like to have that dialogue, and I don't want to get out ahead of our elected
Right.
leadership on this. We would like to have that dialogue with the state legislature and participate in that, yes.
Further questions? Senator Missler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. More of a comment. First of all, I want to commend Sarah for her work on this compact. We've spoken a couple times, and she's doing a fantastic job. You know, this is new to Indiana. I do business in Michigan too, and it's more of a way of life up there, and this is all new to us, so I commend you for that. And I also want to mention something that Chairman Weesaw talked about, relationships, and I'm probably the only one in the room that lives in north central Indiana, and I just want to say he's done a fantastic job of reaching out to local community, you know, local business leaders, local government officials, the legislators, and forming these relationships many years before we even talked about this compact. And so I want to thank him for educating me on their customs. And I think it's helped me to understand why we have to do the compact. And so I feel this presentation was very important because I feel members really need to understand why we're doing a compact. And to Senator Brown, we're really, it's from the legislative standpoint, from a piece of legislation that Senator Kinley did years ago, we're really, the policy's already set. We're just ratifying an agreement between the two. And I think the way they've worked together, I just want to commend both sides for the way this is going, and for Chairman Weesaw for his friendship and willingness to work on this. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Mishler. Very appropriate. Further questions or comments? Thank you very much, and thank you for coming down and spending your time, and thank you for the hard work you do. That concludes the presenters we have for today. We are to meet again tomorrow at 9 a.m. We may have some of the presenters or some of the agencies do it by video, but we'll try and make that all seamless as possible going forward. So 9 a.m. tomorrow here in Senate Chambers. Thank you.